Chapter 1275. When Sun Yunzi and the others fell, the little white dragon was roaring angrily. When it saw the green heavenly lightning, it felt that there was no chance of survival. It hardened its heart and spat out a dragon's breath to support the cracked inner core. After the green heavenly lightning split into half and was absorbed by Xiaohua, it struck the inner core and shattered it into pieces. The little white dragon writhed in pain in the air. Countless cracks appeared on its newly formed dragon body. As Little White writhed, the cracks gradually tore apart and chunks of flesh fell from the sky. Clang, 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 another burst of green heavenly lightning struck Little White's body. All the cracked flesh exploded again, and even Little White's bloody dragon head was split in half. But at this moment, something strange happened again. From the split dragon head, a dragon much smaller than the little white dragon flew out. This dragon also had the appearance of Little White, but its entire body was illusory. This illusory form was different from the illusory form before the lightning tribulation. Every part of this dragon's body was intact, and every tiny dragon scale could be seen. This was the little white dragon that had completely passed the lightning tribulation. The little white dragon rushed into the air, and countless amounts of heaven and earth spiritual energy fused into its illusory body. It gradually condensed and formed a dragon body. The little white dragon didn't care about this at all and directly rushed towards the inner core in the air. It opened its mouth and swallowed the shattered inner core into its stomach. The lightning tribulation is over? 4 bolts of heavenly lightning. The 3 were overjoyed. The more heavenly lightning there was, the higher the cultivation of the python dragon. Naturally, the inner core was worth such a huge risk. The 3 of them circulated their magic power and flew towards Yellow Flower Ridge. At this time, the tribulation clouds had already dissipated, and the entire Yellow Flower Ridge was filled with chaotic heaven and earth spiritual energy. The heaven and earth spiritual energy was also filled with an extremely violent aura. It was as if an extremely small fireball technique could ignite the entire Yellow Flower Ridge. Sun Yunzi and the others were all late nascent soul stage cultivators and could already freely control the heaven and earth spiritual energy. This chaotic heaven and earth spiritual energy couldn't affect their abilities too much. When they saw the little white dragon that was about to swallow the inner core in the air above Shihua Peak, they were all dumbfounded. Is this a python dragon that just underwent its tribulation? Did it fail to pass the tribulation? Reverend Lu Su was extremely shocked. He transmitted the message to Sun Yunzi and Fairy Yingzhua. They were all late-stage nascent soul experts and were also figures standing at the pinnacle of Dawn Rain continent. What kind of bizarre scene had they not seen before? Although he hadn't transcended the tribulation, there were records in the sect's records. He had once observed others transcending the tribulation from afar. Although the tribulation of demonic beasts was different from the tribulation of cultivators, there was no difference in essence. Both were the heavenly thunder-tempering body and the heavenly demons test. These tests were basically a test of one's physical body. Demonic beasts' physical bodies were even stronger, and they had gone through multiple heavenly tribulations. However, they had never heard of demonic beasts abandoning their physical bodies and existing in the form of soul essences after transcending the tribulation. Cultivators could only abandon their physical bodies when they failed their tribulations. Sun Yunzi was secretly delighted. He thought to himself, the dragonization incantation is indeed a supreme incantation. It's actually willing to abandon the physical body and reconstruct the dragon body. If I were to cultivate it, perhaps I would also be able to obtain a Xiantian body condensed from the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. However, there was no expression on his face. He only said in astonishment, "Yes, is this the python dragon's soul essence?" "Oh no. Fellow Taoists, quickly look, this soul essence is condensing, as if..." "Quick, fellow Taoists, don't waste any time. Let's take advantage of the fact that this python dragon hasn't recovered and kill it quickly. It doesn't matter if it's a soul essence or something else. The core of the python dragon is the most important." Fairy Yingzhua sensed that the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was rapidly converging into the little white dragon's body. She felt that something was wrong and immediately transmitted a message to the two. Sun Yunzi, you must know the reason. Reverend Lu Su suddenly realized. I definitely don't know. Fellow Taoist Lu Kong, this is not the time for us to be confused. If there's anything, let's talk about it after we get the Python Dragon's core. How could Sun Yunzi reveal the truth to him? With a wave of his hand, a chain with several tiny bells hanging on it flew out of his hand and towards the sky above the little white dragon. When the chain flew into the sky, it suddenly expanded. The several bells also clanked loudly. Several different sounds, which seemed to have the effect of absorbing souls, reverberated in the sky above the cherishing flower peak. When Reverend Lu and I and Fairy Ingzhua saw Sun Yunzi take out his most powerful magical treasure, soul-snatching chain bell, their expressions changed slightly. Their magic power surged and their bodies glowed faintly, blocking the sound of the bell that invaded their Tao hearts. Fairy Ingzhua and Reverend Lu Su were not the targets of the soul-snatching chain bell. Just the sound of the chain was already so frightening, not to mention the little white dragon directly under the soul-snatching chain bell. The sound of the bell was like ripples on the surface of water, striking the little white dragon one after another, shaking the spiritual energy of heaven and earth around the little white dragon and disturbing the little white dragon's speed of absorbing spiritual energy. However, a strange scene occurred. When the bell sound fell on the little white dragon's body, the little white dragon did not suffer the pain that Sun Yunzi had imagined, nor did it roll on the ground. Instead, it slightly swayed its body, as if it was enjoying the sound. This is bad. Seeing this, Sun Yunzi unconsciously stared blankly, but soon understood. This little white dragon is not in the form of a soul. It has just transformed into a dragon and condensed into a body, so it may not be able to hear any sound. My soul-snatching chain bell can indeed shake the soul, but what this little white dragon cultivates is the dragonization skill, which may be different from ordinary tribulations. Sound attacks won't work, and this python dragon soul is also sturdy. Fellow Taoists, please make your move. Sun Yunzi immediately spread the word that immortal Lu Yun and Fairy Ingzhua were here to help. At this moment, without delay, Fairy Ingzhua clapped her hand, and a slender, radiant stick flew out from the storage pouch on her waist. At the tip of the stick, a large flower bud was about to bloom. It was Fairy Ingzhua's favorite magic weapon, the Tyrant Spring Bud. Fairy Ingzhua held the Tyrant Spring Bud in her hand, and with a push of her magic power, the flower bud at the tip spiraled and gradually bloomed. As the flower bud bloomed, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the surrounding sky surged and gradually condensed into a silken shape beside the flower bud. When the flower bud bloomed into a fresh flower, Fairy Ingzhua let out a thunderous roar, and as if she was pulling a heavy object, she slowly waved her hand. Countless thin silks near the flower bud streaked across the air, driving more spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the surroundings, and pounced on the little white dragon. As these thin silks streaked across the air, they made a la-la-la sound, as if the space was about to be torn apart. The entire silks then transformed into a large net, which almost caught the little white dragon's huge body in one fell swoop. The little white dragon also seemed to have sensed that something was wrong. Its dragon body moved, and white clouds gradually formed under its body. This was the sign of dragon follows cloud and tiger follows wind. Unfortunately, the little white dragon had just crossed the tribulation, and its breathing was weak. Moreover, it had not been long since it became a dragon, and its dragon body had not yet condensed. It simply did not have the strength and magic power to escape. It could only hope that it could withstand the attacks of these three late Yuanying stage experts before its dragon body condensed. The spiritual silks released by the Tyrant Spring Bud covered the little white dragon's body without any suspense. Fairy Ingzhua's mouth revealed a trace of a smile. These thin silks were extremely powerful. If her cultivation could reach the dividing spirit stage, or even cross the tribulation, she could almost tear the space apart. She had always been at an advantage when she used this Tyrant Spring Bud to fight against her enemies. When others saw her using this magic weapon, they would either run far away or use other magic weapons to defend in the air. How would they dare to let the thin silks formed by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth touch their bodies? seeing the little white dragon's dragon body twisting a few times, but the net still fell down. Sun Yunzi's heart that should have been happy jumped for no reason. He felt that there should be something missing. Sure enough, when the net fell on the little white dragon's body, there was no scream as Fairy Ingzhua expected. Instead, it was like a clay ox entering the sea, and there was no sound, not even a ripple. Oh no, seeing this scene, Sun Yunzi immediately understood the warning just now. This little white dragon was currently in the process of forming its body, and it was using the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. This tyrant spring bud. No, even the magic weapons on his body were all using the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to attack. All the attacks that landed on the little white dragon's body would become the spiritual energy for its body forming. How could it be injured? No wonder this little white dragon did not panic. Not only did Sun Yunzi understand, Fairy Ingzhua also understood, and her heart was abnormally angry. Roar, with a dragon roar, the little white dragon swung its gigantic head around. A weak but tenacious divine sense swept past. Its two eyes, which were about to form, flashed with mockery. Fortunately, I's luck is profound, and I have an affinity with this python's inner core. If not for the two helpers today, I'm afraid I would have to return empty-handed. Sun Yunzi's face was full of surprise, but his heart was secretly happy. Returning empty-handed is one thing, but after provoking this demonic beast of the spirit-severing stage, I'm afraid my Shanghua sect will never have a day of peace. Please, fellow Taoist Lu Kong, make a move. Sun Yunzi took out a few palm-sized jade pieces from his storage bag and transmitted his voice to Lu Kong. Humph! Lu Kong coldly snorted and flung the scabbard in his hand. An orange-yellow brilliance shone from his hand and flew into the air. Sun Yunzi, of course I will make a move. However, I have to say first, after this matter is done, I want 50% of this python's inner core, not the previous 30%. Lu Kong slightly narrowed his eyes and transmitted his voice. Also, fellow Taoist needs to tell me everything about this python. You. Sun Yunzi obviously didn't expect Lu Kong to change his mind at the last moment and was somewhat caught off guard. But looking at the flying sword that Lu Kong released, he could only clench his teeth and said coldly, I have already told you about the python, and even if I say it again, it will still be the same. I can agree to your request of 50%, but I still need to ask Fairy Ingzhua's opinion. What opinion can I have? Seeing Sun Yunzi push the matter to her, Fairy Ingzhua sneered. Fellow Taoist Lu Kong has a dragon-slaying sword, after all. However, fellow Taoist Lu Kong's sudden change of mind will damage your reputation. -5. Chapter 1276. Ha ha ha, reputation is nothing. Only the great Tao is real. Reverend Lu Shi laughed wildly and said, Only I have this dragon-slaying technique. If you two fellow Taoists also have this technique, I will let you have it. All right, fellow Taoist Lu Kong, we have agreed. Hurry up and do it. A long delay may cause trouble. Sun Yunzi saw that the little white dragon's body was becoming more and more solid. He couldn't help but feel anxious and urged. At the same time, Sun Yunzi also threw out the stones in his hand. The 4 stones occupied the 4 corners of the sky, trapping the little white dragon in the center. This is... Fairy Ingzhua frowned and looked at the 4 extremely ordinary stones while holding the useless wavy buds in her hand. She scanned them with her divine sense, but didn't find any particularly strong spiritual energy. She couldn't help but feel puzzled. A sharp sword cry resounded in the sky. It was Reverend Lu Shi who activated his magic power to drive the dragon-slaying sword flying in the air. The dragon-slaying sword elongated in the air, about 10 feet long. Its orange-yellow splendor was misty. Reverend Lu Shi sat cross-legged in the air with his palms facing the sky. His face was first flushed, then turned into a waxy yellow color. Quick! Reverend Lu Shi shouted, and released the sword spell in his hand. The dragon-slaying sword streaked across the sky with a piercing sound of wind, chopping straight at the little white dragon. Roar! The sharp sound of wind seemed to have already locked onto the little white dragon. The little white dragon's body turned rapidly barely facing the dragon-slaying sword. It opened its mouth and spat out a weak water-blue splendor, forming a light screen to block the dragon-slaying sword. Unfortunately, the splendor was too weak. The little white dragon's cultivation base was only at the late stage of foundation establishment. How could it resist the full force attack of a late-stage yuanying expert? With a swish, the light screen was directly split open by the dragon-slaying sword, all the way to the bottom. The little white dragon tried to dodge, but it was still too late. The dragon's body, which couldn't be broken through by the soul-stealing chain bell and wavy buds, now appeared extremely fragile under the dragon-slaying sword. Crack! It struck the little white dragon's abdomen, and a large piece of flesh that had just formed was immediately cut off. Dragon flesh and dragon blood sprinkled all over Xihua Peak. Roar! The little white dragon twisted its enormous body with all its strength because of the pain, then raised its enormous tail and slapped straight towards Reverend Liushi. Good timing! Facing the huge dragon tail, Reverend Lu Su was not frightened at all. Instead, he was overjoyed. He sat upright and motionless, then changed his sword gesture. Following his move, an identical dragon-slaying sword was separated from the previous dragon-slaying sword and hacked horizontally towards the dragon tail of the little white dragon. Crack! In an instant, the sword and the dragon tail collided. The tremendous power of the dragon tail shook the dragon-slaying sword, and its orange splendor was almost disrupted. Meanwhile, the sharpness of the dragon-slaying sword had also shattered the dragon scales on the dragon tail and the strange talismans that had yet to form on the dragon scales. Go! Reverend Lu Su's face slightly changed. His magic power surged, and he sent out another sword gesture. The dragon-slaying sword buzzed, and its splendor condensed again. Then, it rushed forward again. Swish! Just like before, a large piece of flesh fell down and sprinkled on Xihua Peak. Naturally, it also buried Xiao Hua's charred body, which had been struck by the heavenly thunder. Who is it? While watching Reverend Lu Su's dragon-slaying skill, Sun Yunzi sensed that someone was spying on him with his divine will. He turned his head and scanned with his divine will. Then, he saw Xiao Yuehong, who had rushed out after sensing the disturbance on Xihua Peak. Meanwhile, Xiao Yuehong was hiding from the thunder tribulation in the alchemy room of Xihua Peak. That frightening thunder tribulation had made his heart tremble. It was not that there had never been a thunder tribulation in Yellow Flower Ridge before, but none of them were as frightening as this one. For heavenly thunders in a row almost made Xiao Yuehong lose his mind of Tao. He had no doubt that he would not be able to survive such a frightening thunder tribulation. After the 4 heavenly thunders ended, Xiao Yuehong waited for a while, but no more heavenly thunders were heard. Only then did he come out of the alchemy room, trembling with fear. This was Xiao Yuehong's fate. Just as he flew to Xihua Peak, he heard the roars of dragons and the sounds of fighting. This was the important place of Shang Huoming's sect. As the sect leader, how could Xiao Yuehong not investigate? However, when he flew into the air, he saw the huge white dragon in the sky and the dragon-slaying sword above it. Then, he sensed 3 nascent soul experts with his divine will. He could not help but have a bad feeling. Although Xiao Yuehong had never seen the 3 sect leaders of the country of Shi, he had heard people describe them. The 3 of them gathered together with Shang Huoming. This was a big event in the country of Shi. Moreover, the 3 of them were besieging a white dragon. Not to mention whether this white dragon belonged to Shang Huoming. Just by seeing this scene, he did not know whether it would be a disaster or a blessing. Sure enough, just as Xiao Yuehong's divine will scanned the area, he was discovered by Sun Yunzi. Xiao Yuehong had a bad feeling and immediately fled. Sun Yunzi went deep into Shang Huoming's important place and killed his guardian spiritual beast. How could he be kind? Just now, he was afraid that the little white dragon would escape, so he did not kill Xiao Yuehong first. Now that Xiao Yuehong had appeared, how could he let him go? With a fierce glint in his eyes, he swung the soul-stealing chain bell in his hand into the air, sending a sound wave towards Xiao Yuehong. Although Xiao Yuehong was already far away from Xihua Peak, the soul-stealing chain bell, which had no effect on the little white dragon, was a supreme killing weapon in front of Xiao Yuehong. Xiao Yuehong had almost no strength to fight back. He had just cast a bead-like magic tool into the air when his body immediately flipped in midair. Whoosh! A gust of wind blew, and a net made of heaven and earth's spiritual chi covered the sky from top to bottom. There was no resistance, and there was no pause. Xiao Yuehong, who was lying in the air, was cut into countless tiny pieces by the net, turning into flesh and blood. Falling from the sky, in front of a late Yuaning stage cultivator, a foundation establishment stage cultivator was even more inferior than a qi refining stage cultivator in front of 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 a qi refining stage cultivator was simply like a baby in front of an adult. Xiao Yuehong did not have any chance to fight back before he was killed on the spot by the two late Yuaning stage cultivators. Immediately, Sun Yunzi and Fairy Yingjue turned their heads indifferently, as if they were killing a small ant, and continued to pay attention to the little white dragon. At this time, the little white dragon's situation was worrying. The dragon-slaying sword was flying around the dragon's head, piercing towards the dragon's brain. There was no doubt that once the dragon-slaying sword pierced into the dragon's brain, the little white dragon would have no chance to survive. Roar! The little white dragon roared again. It opened its mouth and spat out a water-blue brilliance. Within the brilliance, the Niden that had been smashed into pieces by the heavenly thunder had already fused by more than half. Good, good. Reverend Lu, she shouted again, and the dragon-slaying sword quickly pierced towards the Niden. Crack! The dragon-slaying sword pierced the Niden. When the Niden broke, the dragon-slaying sword also broke into thousands of pieces. Normally, the Niden of the little white dragon should not be so weak. Unfortunately, there were 3 heavenly thunders and a different dark green heavenly thunder. The Niden that the little white dragon had painstakingly cultivated was already full of holes. How could it resist the sharpness of the dragon-slaying sword? And the magical power of a late Yuanying stage expert? Even the physical body that the little white dragon relied on to escape was also in great danger at this time. Seeing the dragon-slaying sword being shattered, Reverend Lu, she didn't seem to be worried at all, as if he had already had a plan in mind. Indeed, once Reverend Lu, she changed his sword spell, those thousands of dragon-slaying sword fragments transformed back into tiny dragon-slaying swords one after another, transforming into a huge sword formation around the little white dragon, trapping the little white dragon in it from all directions. Sword formation? Seeing this, Sun Yunzi and Fairy Yingjue's expressions changed slightly. The magic formations of the Dawn Rain continent had always been a secret and had been lost for a long time. Ordinary magic formations had been simplified into restrictive spells, and even the magic formations that had been passed down from generation to generation were specious. They only knew how to use them, but did not know how to create new ones, not to mention a sword formation that was almost a legend among legends. Therefore, when they saw Reverend Lu, she used the legendary sword formation, both of them felt a chill in their hearts and became respectful and vigilant towards this fellow Taoist who could not distinguish between friend and foe. Sitting cross-legged, Reverend Lu, she made a sword spell with both of his hands, using his divine sense, which was different from that of an ordinary late Yuanying stage expert, to drive the sword formation laid out by the dragon-slaying sword. Hundreds and thousands of tiny flying swords were flying in all directions, blocking all the space around the little white dragon and gradually approaching the little white dragon. Frightened, the little white dragon gathered the Niden that had been destroyed by the dragon-slaying sword once again. Just when it was about to swallow it into its stomach, suddenly, outside the sword formation, in the 4 corners of the sky, 4 bright spots of light flashed like stars. Not only Reverend Lu Shi, but Fairy Yingjue was also stunned. They simply did not notice that Sun Yunzi, who was standing beside them, was making a spell with his hands, and 4 different spells struck on the 4 seemingly ordinary stones that he had laid out in the air just now. At this time, the stones had already changed from their usual appearance. Each of them was shining with a dark green brilliance, and within the brilliance, 4 balls of dark green liquid that had been melted into 4 balls were slightly swaying. Along with the swaying of the balls of liquid, countless amounts of spiritual chi of heaven and earth were absorbed by these 4 balls of liquid. Quick, Sun Yunzi let out a clear shout, and a mouthful of his natal energy was spurted out. In front of Sun Yunzi, it divided into 4 balls of liquid. Shwa, 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 shwa. 4 consecutive sounds rang out. The 4 balls of liquid were broken by Sun Yunzi's life essence. After the liquid exploded, it disappeared. A net of spirit energy suddenly formed from the liquid. Then, with each corner as the center, it spread in all directions. In the blink of an eye, the spirit energy from the 4 corners intertwined and wrapped around the sword formation and the small white dragon. Withdraw, seeing the net of spiritual chi take shape. Sun Yunzi's face showed a hint of joy. He pointed his finger, and the net of spiritual chi suddenly produced an endless suction force. The Niden that was about to be absorbed into the little white dragon's stomach actually stopped under this suction force and slowly moved away from the little white dragon. Jade Talisman. Fairy Ingzhua almost moaned in her heart. It's a 4-piece jade talisman. Although this jade talisman needs to be activated by Sun Yunzi's natal energy and is at a disadvantage, but a spell that can encircle the little white dragon and absorb the Niden is definitely not something that Sun Yunzi can perform. -5. Chapter 1277. Immediately, Fairy Ingzhua had the same doubts as Reverend Lu Shi. Is it worth so much effort for a mere python dragon's inner core? Judging from Sun Yunzi's preparation, it's complete. I'm afraid it's not something that can be done in a day or 2. Could it be? There's really some unknown secret behind this? Not to mention Fairy Ingzhua's doubts outside the sword formation, little white dragon inside the sword formation was in imminent danger. The sword formation was approaching, and its inner core had been taken away by the huge suction force generated by the jade talisman. No matter how hard little white dragon tried, it was absolutely unable to contend against the sword formation with its current foundation establishment magical power. Roar, little white dragon's body rolled for a while. Its dragon consciousness swept over Shihua Peak below. At this moment, the peak of Shihua Peak was in a mess. The flesh and blood of little white dragon's body during the tribulation were scattered all over the peak. Among the rocks, among the flesh and blood, Xiao Hua was lying there like a dead person, without any breath. A sense of speechless tragedy arose in little white dragon's mind that had not yet fully matured. Whoosh, little white dragon's body seemed to have been set off by a hurricane. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth within 1,000 feet crazily gathered into little white dragon's body. Even the net-like spiritual energy released by the jade talisman showed signs of being defeated. The sword formation of the dragon-slaying sword was also somewhat scattered. Quick, this guy is going to use a great magical power. Sun Yunzi was shocked. He sent a sound transmission to Reverend Lu Shi. Fellow Lu Kong, speed up the sword formation. Reverend Lu Shi swept a glance at Sun Yunzi. Without answering, he urged his magical power and divine sense to speed up the sword formation. It was not that he didn't want to speed up, but he was not very proficient in using this sword formation. Moreover, the sword formation itself was not complete. In addition, driving hundreds and thousands of dragon-slaying swords at the same time was already the limit of his divine sense. He wanted to speed up, but he couldn't. Little white dragon's body was visibly expanding. When the dragon-slaying sword pierced into little white dragon's body was already bigger than before the tribulation. However, this was not the end. The dragon-slaying sword pierced into little white dragon's body, and that huge body expanded again. Boom, a loud noise was heard, as if a huge bubble had burst in midair. Little white dragon's body, which had long been condensed by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, suddenly expanded, and its newly formed flesh flew in all directions. The majority of the thousands of dragon-slaying swords that pierced into little white dragon's body was annihilated, and the remaining few swordses they were dimmed. They lost control of control. They flew little white dragon's body, scattered, flew. Little white dragon body, little white dragon's bodies. Right after that, a 1-foot-tall nascent soul, clad in a strange armor, emerged from the top of Reverend Lu Kong's head. The nascent soul looked exactly the same as Reverend Lu Kong, except that it was also holding a tiny dragon-slaying sword. The nascent soul landed on the top of Reverend Lu Kong's head, its eyes shining with a furious light. With a wave of the tiny sword, the surrounding natural energies were easily mobilized. Hundreds of dragon-slaying swords, which had been knocked away by the little white dragon, flashed dimly and flew back to the tiny sword in the nascent soul's hand. When all the tiny swords fell into the tiny sword and disappeared, a half-broken flying sword appeared in Reverend Lu Kong's hand at the same time. The nascent soul above Little White Dragon's head glanced at the location of the sword formation, its face filled with surprise and bewilderment. Then, it sank down into Little White Dragon's body and disappeared. Fellow Taoist Sun Yun, that evil dragon is escaping. Little White Dragon opened his eyes and pointed his finger. Near the web-like spiritual energy released by the Jade Talisman, a faint dragon soul flashed rapidly, fleeing towards the north. Fairy Yingjua was even more shocked. She was also one of the top 3 experts in the country of Shi, and also a late-stage nascent soul cultivator. What she had seen and heard was absolutely extraordinary. But she did not expect that Little White Dragon, in such a desperate situation, could still escape with its soul. Sun Yunzi was shocked, but then a faint smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. He spat out another mouthful of his natal energy. The web-like spiritual energy that had been scattered by the explosion gradually stabilized. Part of the web wrapped around Little White Dragon's inner core, while the other part wrapped around Little White Dragon's soul. I will help you. Fairy Yingjua knew that Sun Yunzi was hiding something, so she certainly would not let go of such a good opportunity. With a wave of her hand, another web of spiritual energy also wrapped around Little White Dragon's soul. Fellow Taoist, please wait. Sun Yunzi was anxious and transmitted his voice. Fellow Taoist, have you forgotten that this evil dragon can absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to form an attack? Fairy Yingjua disagreed and snorted coldly. Your Jade Talisman can be used, but I can't use my magic weapon? While they were talking, the web had already crossed the web formed by the Jade Talisman and was much faster. Alas, Sun Yunzi fiercely stamped his foot in the air and said in a strange tone, I's Jade Talisman can only control the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, not attack, so it can control the suction force and suck in Little White Dragon's inner core. In addition, because this Jade Talisman can control the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, it can also confine the space. Little White Dragon's soul cannot escape. A Jade Talisman made by a spirit-severing cultivator? Confine the space was a magical ability that only spirit-severing cultivators could use. If this spell was not sealed in the Jade Essence by a spirit-severing cultivator, how could it confine the space? Little White Dragon's inner core had already escaped to the edge of the Jade Talisman's web, but because there was no spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the surroundings and all the space was confined, it could not absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Therefore, it looked at the thin web and did not dare to collide with it. Under Fairy Yingjua's web, Little White Dragon's inner core flashed a bright light. When the web fell, it immediately turned into pure spiritual energy of heaven and earth and was absorbed by the inner core. With a sound, Little White Dragon's inner core seemed to have taken a strong elixir and suddenly became bigger. Then, it immediately collided with the Jade Talisman's web. When it got closer, the inner core suddenly changed its shape. It became an extremely thin and long strip, like a long iron needle, and fiercely pierced into the web. With a puff sound, a thin and tall bulge was pushed out of the web. However, the web was abnormally tough and could not be pierced through. Sun Yunzi sneered in his heart. From his storage bag, he took out a black bracelet made of unknown material and threw it into the air. The black bracelet quietly flew towards Little White Dragon's inner core. A strong suction force was generated, trying to pull Little White Dragon's inner core into the bracelet. Soul-absorbing ring. At this time, Immortal Luan Eye stood up in the air. With a sneer in his eyes, he sent a sound transmission to Sun Yunzi. Fellow Sun Yunzi, could it be that, from the beginning, you wanted this evil dragon's inner core? When? Sun Yunzi flatly denied. This soul-absorbing ring belongs to old man Imo Sang. He would not lend it to others. Fellow Sun Yunzi even took it out. If you did not plan to do so, how could we believe you? Fairy Ingzhua also sent a sound transmission with a smile. Although the three Yuanying experts had not obtained Little White Dragon's inner core and soul essence, they already had a certain disagreement. It was no wonder that Little White Dragon's inner core could not resist the suction force of the soul-absorbing ring. It was directly sucked into the soul-absorbing ring. When Sun Yunzi and the others saw this, they naturally knew that the soul-absorbing ring was specially designed to deal with soul essences. Little White Dragon's inner core would definitely not survive. Therefore, they relaxed their vigilance. Unfortunately, something unexpected happened again. When Little White Dragon's inner core was forcibly sucked out by the soul-absorbing ring from the net of the Jade Talisman, Little White Dragon's inner core paused at first, then gradually flew closer to the soul-absorbing ring. As the distance between the soul-absorbing ring decreased, Little White Dragon's inner core accelerated. When Little White Dragon's inner core was about 10 feet away from the soul-absorbing ring, Little White Dragon's inner core suddenly exerted its strength and rapidly crashed into the soul-absorbing ring. With the two forces superimposed, that speed was almost invisible to the naked eye. Oh no! Although Sun Yunzi was trying to shirk responsibility to Luan Aizhenren and Fairy Ingzhua, his divine sense had been paying attention to the soul-absorbing ring. When Little White Dragon's inner core suddenly accelerated, he was puzzled at first. However, when Little White Dragon's inner core approached the soul-absorbing ring, it suddenly changed its direction slightly and flew past the soul-absorbing ring. Because Little White Dragon's inner core was extremely fast, and the force it produced was also incomparable to the suction force of the soul-absorbing ring. Therefore, the soul-absorbing ring was unable to suck in the soul-absorbing ring for a while. Seeing Little White Dragon's soul essence escape from the soul-absorbing ring, Sun Yunzi immediately formed a seal and wanted to reverse the direction of the soul-absorbing ring. However, the speed of the soul essence was too fast. Before he could reverse the soul-absorbing ring, the soul essence had already shot into the net formed by the Jade Talisman. This time, it was different from last time. With an extremely fast speed, it produced a great force and pulled the net extremely long. With a light poof, before Sun Yunzi could spit out his life essence again, the soul essence pierced a very small hole in the net formed by the Jade Talisman. A tiny hole. That was enough. Little White Dragon's inner core pierced through the net and rapidly shot into the distance. Quick, Sun Yunzi was alarmed. He stretched out his hand and slapped his forehead. Sun Yunzi's nascent soul also emerged from the top of his head and transformed into a beam of light that chased into the distance. Although the beam of light was much faster than Sun Yunzi and the others' physical bodies, it was still too slow compared to Little White Dragon's inner core. Sun Yunzi's nascent soul chased for only a dozen or so kilometers before it lost track of Little White Dragon's inner core. With no other choice, it returned in the direction of Shihua Peak. Just as nascent soul flew to the side of Shihua Peak, it heard a voice. Eldest senior brother, when did our Yellow Flower Ridge have a baby? It was the voice of Shang Huaming's second disciple, Zhang Qingxiao. Where? Did master go out and pick up another one? Gong Mingwei's voice also sounded. There, Zhang Qingxiao casually pointed. Ah? Nascent soul? Gong Mingwei was shocked. What? Nascent soul? Boss, don't scare me. Since when did our Yellow Flower Ridge have a nascent soul senior? Zhang Qingxiao clearly didn't expect to see a nascent soul expert near Shihua Peak. Greetings, senior. Gong Mingwei hurriedly bowed in a panic. Sun Yunzi clearly knew about these two disciples. Sun Yunzi's nascent soul's eyes flashed with ruthlessness as it waved its two small hands towards the sky. Two lightning palms formed in its hands and struck Gong Mingwei and Zhang Qingxiao's bodies. The two pitiful people were only at the 11th stage of qi refinement. How could they be a match for Sun Yunzi's nascent soul? Before any thoughts could form in their minds, a burst of intense pain came from their chests. -5. Chapter 1278. The vision of the two turned dark as they fell from Xiao Yuehong's flying boat. One of them landed on a rock on Cherishing Flower Peak and was no longer breathing. The other fell into the cold pond on Cherishing Flower Peak and disappeared without a trace after being hit by the water. They had truly died without a burial ground. After killing the two, Sun Yunzi's nascent soul did not stop at all. When the two were struck by the lightning, Sun Yunzi's nascent soul had already sensed that they had lost their vitality. Immediately, it flew up into the air and entered Sun Yunzi's body. Lu Hong and Fairy Yingjue had already seen Sun Yunzi's nascent soul kill people. When Sun Yunzi's nascent soul flew back, Lu Hong clapped his hands and said, "Good. Fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi is indeed a good schemer. You've wiped out Shang Huaming's entire sect and captured his sect's guardian spiritual beast. How admirable. Fellow Taoist Lu Hong, you're too kind. You don't need the evil dragon's inner core." Sun Yunzi's face was expressionless, but his eyes were full of sarcasm. "I deserve the most credit for killing the evil dragon, so the inner core is half of eyes." Lu Hong sneered. "As for killing Shang Huaming's descendants, I didn't do anything. Why can't I say anything?" "Who said I killed Shang Huaming's descendants? Xiao Yuehong's daughter is not in Yellow Flower Ridge, and I didn't intend to kill them either." Sun Yunzi sneered as well. "You've killed the sect leader and 2 disciples, leaving only a little girl behind. How can Shang Huaming still exist?" Lu Hong smiled faintly. "Fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi, why don't you find the little girl and kill her? You don't have to worry about leaving her in this world. Hee, maybe in the future, when she cultivates a supreme divine ability, she'll come to you for revenge." Sun Yunzi's eyes narrowed, and he sneered, "I was going to find the little girl and kill her, but since fellow Taoist Lu Hong is so enthusiastic, I don't want to hurt her at all. Tonight, there are only 3 of us in Yellow Flower Ridge. Do you think I's afraid of being exposed?" Fellow Taoist Lu Hong, I wonder if fellow Taoist Lu Hong has taken a fancy to that little girl's aptitude? Do you want to recruit her into the sect? Bah, my 7 possibilities sect has plenty of people with such unbearable aptitude. Why would I covet her aptitude? Fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi, you'd better hurry up and give the inner core of the evil dragon to I. Reverend Lu, she said coldly, no longer trying to infuriate Sun Yunzi. Sun Yunzi pondered for a moment and asked, "Of course I'll give you the inner core, but I would like to ask, if you're taking the inner core to refine the Python Dragon Pill? Strange, what will I do with this inner core? Do I have to tell you, fellow Taoist?" Reverend Lu and I sneered. Sun Yunzi looked at the slightly white sky and turned to ask Fairy Yingjue, "Where is my friend?" Fairy Yingjue said calmly, "I naturally want to refine the Python Dragon Pill, but, fellow cultivator, you sent the news too late. In a hurry, I can't prepare all the materials needed to refine the Python Dragon Pill. I am still thinking whether this inner core can be used for other purposes." Well, fellow Taoist Yingjue is right. However, this evil dragon's inner core is the most effective for refining the Python Dragon Pill, and it's also the most useful for us. If it's used to refine other pills, it'll be a waste. Fairy Yingjue's heart skipped a beat, and she transmitted her voice. "Fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi, what do you mean?" "Haha, it's nothing. I have been paying attention to this evil dragon's movements for a long time, so my preparations are very complete. So, if fellow Taoist Yingjue is not worried, you can give your inner core to I, and after I refine the Python Dragon Pill, I'll give it to fellow Taoist Yingjue. What do you think?" "Oh, of course." Fairy Yingjue was slightly stunned, and after thinking for a while, she asked curiously, "But I don't know. What are your conditions?" Sun Yunzi smiled, but did not agree. He turned to ask Reverend Lu Shi, "Fellow Taoist Lu Kong, what do you think?" Like Fairy Yingjue, Reverend Lu Shi thought for a while, and asked, "Fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi, please tell us your conditions first." "Fellow Taoist Yingjue, and I will listen to it first." "Haha, it's nothing. I have a few disciples who practice body refining, and they need the blood and flesh of this evil dragon. So, I want to bring the blood and flesh of this evil dragon back to the Shanghua sect and use it as the price for refining the Python Dragon Pill for you too. What do you think?" Reverend Lu, she turned to look at Fairy Yingjue, and he was a little puzzled. Although the blood and flesh of this little white dragon had passed through the Thunder Tribulation and was a precious material for refining pills, refining weapons, and even body refining, it had too few uses. Compared with the inner core of this little white dragon, it was really insignificant. He did not know why Sun Yunzi was interested in the blood and flesh of this little white dragon. Of course, he knew that even if he asked, Sun Yunzi would not explain. So he had to say awkwardly, "Fellow Taoist, Sun Yunzi's request is really difficult for I originally wanted to take advantage of you too." Hearing this, Sun Yunzi was so angry that his lungs were about to explode, and he cursed in his heart. He knew that if he did not mention it, Reverend Lu Shi might not mention it, but he wanted to find the trace of the dragon transformation skill from this blood and flesh, so it was impossible for him not to mention it. He did not believe that the essence of the little white dragon could take away the item that recorded the dragon transformation skill. However, Sun Yunzi's face did not have any color, and he only smiled insincerely and said, "Oh, since fellow Taoist Lu Kong is also interested in this useless blood and flesh, then fine, I will not rob you. Fellow Taoist Lu, she can take half of this evil dragon's inner core, and I will take the rest. When I refine the Python Dragon Pill, I will give a share to fellow Taoist Ingzhua. As for the blood and flesh of this Python Dragon, just divide it into 3 parts, and each of us will have one." Hearing this, Reverend Lu Shi rolled his eyes and hesitated. "Well, you two fellow Taoists don't need to argue." Fairy Ingzhua knew that it was time for her to speak, so she said with a smile, "I have never seen the blood and flesh of an evil dragon that has gone through the thunder tribulation. In my opinion, why don't we let fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi choose first, and when he has taken enough, I and fellow Taoist Lu Kong can take some of the rest. What do you think? Fellow Taoist Lu Kong? Well, very good. My sect also needs to strengthen the training of body-refining disciples, so I have to take some of this blood and flesh." Reverend Lu Shi laughed, and his face was full of embarrassment. "Well, since both of you need it, how can I not fulfill your wish?" Sun Yunzi laughed. He pointed his finger, and the jade talisman with the inner core of the little white dragon in it flew over. Sun Yunzi put the inner core into a jade bottle and pasted a yellow talisman on it. Then, he took out an alms bowl-like object from his storage bag. He raised his hand, and it flew into the air. Puff! He spat a mouthful of air on the alms bowl. The alms bowl flashed with a misty brilliance and suddenly expanded. Quick! Sun Yunzi cast a spell, and the mouth of the alms bowl pointed downwards, emitting a white brilliance from its mouth. "Go!" Sun Yunzi shouted again. The alms bowl emitted a white light and flew up from the summit of Cherishing Flower Peak. In just a moment, the blood and flesh of the little white dragon were all sucked into the alms bowl. Reverend Lu Shi looked at Fairy Ingzhua, and both of them had some understanding in their eyes. Reverend Lu Shi secretly transmitted his voice, "Fellow Taoist Ingzhua, this Sun Yunzi took out the soul-absorbing ring in the immemorial bowl, so it must be not simple. Fellow Taoist, have you noticed anything?" I also felt that something was not right, but Sun Yunzi did not reveal any flaws, which made I puzzled. Fairy Ingzhua also felt helpless. Not long after, Sun Yunzi collected all of the little white dragon's blood and flesh. He pointed his finger at the immemorial bowl, and it flew back to his hand. After holding it in his hand, Sun Yunzi said with a smile, "Fellow Taoists, do you have any suitable magic treasures to store it?" "Humph." Reverend Lu Shi shook his hand, and a small storage bag flew out. "Just put it here." "Okay." Sun Yunzi pointed his finger, and several pieces of blood and flesh flew out from the immemorial bowl and were put into the storage bag by Reverend Lu Shi. "Fellow Taoist Lu Kong, do you still want it?" Sun Yunzi looked at Reverend Lu Shi and asked. Reverend Lu Shi used his divine sense to check the storage bag, but found nothing unusual, and shook his head slightly. "Then, I thank fellow Taoist Lu Kong," Sun Yunzi said with a smile, and gave some of the blood and flesh to Fairy Ingzhua, and then put away the immemorial bowl. Sun Yunzi raised his eyes to look at Dongfang Yuxiao, and cupped his hands at them, saying with a smile, "I thank you for your help last night. As for the Python Dragon Pills, when I collect them, I'll send a message to you, and give you your share." "Okay, then we'll have to trouble you. Fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi?" Reverend Lu Shi and Fairy Ingzhua cupped their hands in return. After saluting, Sun Yunzi made a hand seal, and his figure turned into a rainbow and flew away. Reverend Lu Shi and Fairy Ingzhua looked at each other and also flew away. Only the blood-stained Shi Hua Peak was left, and it became brighter and brighter under the sunlight. After the meal, in midair, the space shook for a while, and a figure gradually showed up. It was Sun Yunzi, who was frowning in anger. Sun Yunzi showed up and took off a 3-finger-wide, palm-length talisman from his body and carefully put it into his storage bag. He released his divine sense and looked in the direction where Reverend Lu Shi and Fairy Ingzhua left. He gave a cold snort and then set his eyes on Shi Hua Peak. Sun Yunzi's spiritual sense followed his gaze and carefully searched Cherishing Flower Peak, Mincy Peak, and other places. After a full 2 hours, Sun Yunzi still did not find the dragonization art that he was looking for. Strange, there is no dragonization art in the evil dragon's flesh and blood, and its soul essence cannot be taken away. Could it be this poor Taoist misjudged? This evil dragon doesn't practice the dragonization skill? That's possible. The dragonization skill is the supreme skill of demon beasts. How could it appear in my Dawn Rain continent, or in a small school in this deviated place? But if it's not the dragonization skill, then how do you explain the various abnormalities of the evil dragon? Sun Yunzi thought for a while, but he still couldn't figure it out, and his face became darker and darker. Thinking that he gave up the Python Dragon Core for the dragonization skill, Sun Yunzi's anger came from nowhere. Kacha! Kacha! Several loud sounds were heard. Sun Yunzi stretched out his left and right hands, and several thunder palms hit the peak of Shi Hua Peak. Rumble! The power of the thunder palms was so great that the entire Shi Hua Peak collapsed. Xiao Hua's charred corpse was also crushed under the rubble. -5. Chapter 1279. Damn it! Sun Yunzi shouted angrily. He took out the palm-sized talisman from his storage bag and used his magic to stick it on his body. Sun Yunzi's body immediately disappeared. Only a gust of wind could be heard. Sun Yunzi must have gone far away. A long while later, Reverend Lu Shi and Fairy Ingzhua showed up separately. Both of them frowned and looked at the messy Shi Hua Peak, then used their spirit powers to scan Shi Hua Peak and the other peaks. Only then did they leave empty-handed, just like Sun Yunzi. On Shi Hua Peak, at the bottom of the pile of rubble, Xiao Hua's charcoal-like body was motionless. There was no sign of life at all. He was no different from a corpse. However, in the space behind Xiao Hua's head, there was a change that Sun Yunzi and others couldn't even dream of. In that space, the light source of the cube stopped there quietly. It didn't rotate like before. Above the light source, in the distance, there was a sky canopy like the night sky. In that sky canopy, there were countless stars. They were all flickering. These stars weren't static. Instead, they were slowly rotating along one or several indescribable, obscure, and mysterious trajectories. It seemed that this rotation had existed since ancient times. It also seemed that this trajectory had existed long before this space was formed. This was the heavenly Tao starry sky that was driven by the heavenly Tao contained in Little White Dragon's thunder tribulation. Compared to before, the heavenly Tao's rotation was obviously much slower. However, in the slowness, the traces of the heavenly Tao became more obvious. All kinds of subtle details were gradually revealed. The heavenly Tao's chaotic, mellow, and ubiquitous characteristics were undoubtedly revealed. Under the heavenly Tao, although the light source of the cube was stagnant, a golden shadow was projected from the light source. It looked like a human, but not a human. That shadow stood in the space. It was unknown whether it was a hand or a foot. It was inexplicably gesturing there. This gesture seemed to be a fist or a foot. It also seemed to be a magic art. Every time it moved, a red brilliance was transmitted from one part of the shadow's hand and foot to another part. When the shadow stood still, that brilliance just happened to pass through the shadow's hand and foot. The golden light of the shadow also slightly swelled, seemingly sending out a kind of fluctuation. Then, the shadow moved again. This time, it made a different movement. An orange brilliance appeared. It was still transmitted through the shadow's hand and foot along with the shadow's movements. When the shadow stopped, it transmitted through the entire hand and foot. The golden light of the shadow also changed into another kind of fluctuation. This process was repeated 7 times. The brilliance turned from red to orange, then yellow, green, cyan, blue, and finally purple. Every time it changed color, the fluctuation of the golden light would also change. When the purple brilliance passed through the shadow's hands and feet, the shadow was no longer golden. Instead, it was red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and purple. The colors were constantly changing, and as the colors changed, the shadow's wave also changed. In the end, the shadow turned black, and the wave of the shadow became extremely strange. But at the same time, a pure white dot appeared somewhere in the shadow. The white dot spread extremely quickly, and in the blink of an eye, the shadow turned white, almost transparent. The shadow's fluctuations also became very familiar. Suddenly, a ray of light shot out from the cube's light source. The white shadow swayed slightly and actually melted into the ray of light and disappeared. Xiaohua's consciousness seemed to exist, yet it also seemed to not exist. It seemed to remain within this space, yet it also seemed to be the entire space. In short, Xiaohua's consciousness was clear about the changes in the entire space. Light escape. This is actually light escape, using light as an escape technique. This is really unimaginable. Xiaohua's consciousness did not have any form. It seemed to be as small in this space, yet it also seemed like the entire space was Xiaohua. But this was not the main point. The main point was that no matter what form it took, it could not stop him from thinking. I've only heard of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth escape techniques. How do I know about this? Could it be? Xiaohua's consciousness swept across the still light source in the space, which was like a blazing sun. This thing is actually called tracing light. Not only did the golden shadow shoot out from this tracing light, it seemed like a lot of things had rushed out from this tracing light. The reason why I know about the 5 elements escape technique was also because it was transmitted from inside just now. Could it be my memories? My memories from the past 10 years were all hidden inside this tracing light? This is strange. This tracing light clearly has nothing to do with me. How did my memories run inside? Furthermore, if you gave it to me, then just give it to me. Why did you give me some vague and incomplete things? You only said light escape technique. You only told me that I had to first cultivate the 5 elements escape technique and use different fist techniques or body refining techniques as the foundation of the 5 elements escape technique to temper my bones. Only then can I cultivate the light escape technique by refining the 7 colors of my bones. Oh, that's right. It seems like in the bone refining 7 colors, every time the color changes, the fluctuation changes, it has to be guided by the 5 elements origin. What are these 5 elements origin? Where did this tracing light come from? Where did this space in my mind come from? Also, the starry sky above this tracing light looks very familiar. They didn't seem to exist before. How did they appear? Xiaohua's consciousness had already started to become confused. There were really too many secrets that he did not know. However, he immediately thought, my cultivation is low and I don't have any ability to protect myself. The only sure kill skill I can rely on is to use force to break through. And this requires close combat. Since I have to get close, speed is the most important thing. This light escape technique, if I can cultivate it successfully, my speed will be extremely fast and I will be able to kill with one strike. Even if I can't succeed, I can still escape far away and there will be no need to worry about my life. Cultivating this light escape technique should be the most important thing. This incomplete snake-shaped ring. Why is there something else? Xiaohua's consciousness noticed that within the space, the snake-shaped ring that he had always been unable to figure out its origin had already been mended. It was a swaying dragon tail. At first glance, it was somewhat similar to the tail of the deity in Shang Huaming's inheritance palace. Just as Xiaohua's consciousness noticed that snake-shaped ring, an inexplicable handwriting and symbols came out from that ring and entered Xiaohua's consciousness. Dragon transformation art? What's this thing? Xiaohua's consciousness was slightly startled. It seemed that his entire consciousness had been occupied by the dragon transformation art. Xiaohua's consciousness did not dare to be negligent. Just like how he usually comprehended the art, the entire space became still as he carefully comprehended the thing that was transmitted to him. Just like this, the space in Xiaohua's mind was completely silent. Tracing light was also still stagnant. Only that golden figure repeated its previous actions over and over again. The colors on its body also changed one after another until finally, it slowly disappeared and was absorbed into the tracing light. Time passed very quickly and also very slowly. After an unknown amount of time, the tracing light's brilliance flashed and the fluctuations reappeared. Then, it started to rotate again. Only this time, the rotation was different from before. It actually followed the trajectory of the heavenly Tao in the starry sky. It was even more profound and obscure. On Cherishing Flower Peak, the sun was still shining. However, under the sprinkling of the sunlight, the peak's peak was filled with gravel. It had long lost its previous beauty and variety. The gravel had been piled up for many days without any signs of movement. At this time, the gravel suddenly moved. First, it slightly protruded and then fell down. Then, that protrusion rose again. The gravel around the protrusion rolled to the side, creating a series of noises. After a few repetitions, that protrusion suddenly rushed up. The gravel crashed and rolled in all directions, creating an extremely loud noise. What followed that protrusion was an extremely black human figure. That human figure landed on the gravel. Under the sunlight, one could see that it was completely charred black from head to toe. With a light "ka" sound, just as that human figure landed on the gravel, the mountain wind blew. A crack appeared on that human figure's charred skin. Soon after, more and more cracks appeared. "Ka" sounds were incessant. When the sound stopped, a gust of wind blew. Pieces of thin, charred black fragments fell from the human figure's body. What flowed out was a white, smooth. Xiaohua. Xiaohua first looked around in confusion. When the fragments fell to the ground and the mountain wind hit his body, he came to his senses. With a swipe of his left hand, he took out a Taoist robe from the space and quickly put it on. As he passed it around, he muttered, "Fortunately, this young master's moral quality is good. I've already prepared a Taoist robe. Otherwise, I don't know which girl would have benefited from this robe." Just as his voice fell, Xiaohua's expression immediately became strange. He quickly covered his mouth with his hand. His eyes spun around as he thought, What's wrong with me? How can I casually say this? In this yellow flower ridge, other than senior sister, what other girls are there? If this was heard by second senior brother, wouldn't I be in trouble?" While thinking, he unconsciously patted his forehead with his hand. Where's my hair? Why is this young master's hair gone again?" Xiaohua howled in grief. At the same time, he muttered in his heart, "Why is it gone again? Could it be that it also happened before?" After putting on the Taoist robe properly, Xiaohua continued to look at the mess in front of him. Is this still Shihua Peak? How did the peak of the mountain become like this? Xiaohua jumped down from the pile of rubble and looked at the dark brown mountain rocks under his feet. There were obviously some blood stains. When he looked to the side, there were even more. Could it be Little White's bloodstains? Xiaohua was stunned. He recalled the matter of him fainting. Little White? Little White is actually a dragon? Xiaohua frowned. Dragon transformation art. Could it be related to Little White? That's right. Was Little White undergoing the lightning tribulation last night? Were these bloodstains left behind by Little White? Little White. Did it pass the lightning tribulation? Xiaohua felt a burst of worry in his heart. He thought for a moment and secretly said in his heart, I'd better go and ask the sect master. The commotion last night was so big. How could the sect master not know? There are more and more things in my mind. Should I tell the sect master? Xiaohua's heart was perturbed. He thought about the light evasion art and the dragon transformation art as he flew towards Mint's worship peak. That brat you, who are you? Suddenly, a voice came from midair. -5. Chapter 1280. Just as Xiaohua was immersed in his thoughts, struggling with the dilemma of whether to tell the sect leader or not, he suddenly heard someone shouting in the air not far away, "You brat, who are you?" Xiaohua was slightly taken aback. After hearing this, he very naturally replied, "Me? Of course it's Xiao." Before the name Xiaohua could leave his mouth, Xiaohua came to his senses and almost jumped up in the air. He stretched out his arm and pointed at the two fifth-layer qi refining cultivators flying over. "This is my Shenghua underworld's territory. Who do you think you are?" He scolded. "What qualifications do you have to ask for my I's name?" But then, Xiaohua's eyes turned, and he somewhat came to his senses. He lowered his voice and cupped his hands, saying, "Fellow Taoists, could it be that you've come to Shanghua Ming to pay a visit to my sect master?" "Shanghua Ming? Sect master?" The two cultivators were stunned. They glanced at each other in amazement, then vigilance appeared on their faces. One of them stretched out his hand and took out a summoning talisman from his bosom. With a burst of magic power, the summoning talisman flew away. The other person laughed disdainfully, saying, "A second-layer qi refining junior dares to loot a burning house at Yellow Flower Ridge? Don't tell me you don't want to live anymore?" Then he said to the person next to him, "Is there a need to send a message for this kind of thing? Just directly kill him." The young sect master has ordered that all abnormalities should be reported. Junior martial brother, don't make a mistake. That person didn't agree, but his movements weren't slow either. He unfolded the yellow talisman in his hand and swiftly flew towards Xiaohua. Xiaohua was furious. This was his, Shanghua Ming's, territory. Others actually said he came to loot a burning house. How could he tolerate this kind of thing? With a wave of his hand, he also took out a fireball talisman. However, just as he was about to activate the flying talisman to attack, his heart suddenly stirred. Young sect master? Then, he looked again. Of course, these two people were dressed in 100 Herbs sect's attire. They were the same people he saw at Medicine Farmer Peak. "Your 100 Herbs sect's disciples? Where is Jiang Fan? Why are you showing off in my Shanghua Ming's territory?" Xiaohua stopped and gripped the fireball talisman in his hand. He coldly stared at the two fifth-level qi refining disciples who were flying much slower than him. "You also know that Yellow Flower Ridge is now the territory of my 100 Herbs sect? Now you know the name of our young master?" The 200 Herbs Gate disciples sneered. "Since you know, you still want to take advantage of the situation? Isn't it too late to find out now? Yellow Flower Ridge is now your 100 Herbs Gate's territory?" When Xiaohua heard this, he became anxious and immediately asked, "Where is my Shanghuaming's gate master? Where are my eldest senior brother, second senior brother, and senior sister?" "Oh, that's right. Didn't my senior sister accept the invitation of your 100 Herbs Gate's young master Jiang and go to your medicinal farmer peak? My eldest senior brother and second senior brother want to send him off, and they haven't returned since last night. I understand now. Your 100 Herbs Gate actually plotted to kill my senior brother and senior sister, and then killed your way into my Yellow Flower Ridge?" When he thought of this, Xiaohua's face became as cold as ice. However, he didn't use the fireball talisman. Since 100 Herbs Gate had already taken over this place, they definitely had more disciples than these two. If he attacked, he'd have to wait until he had the confidence to escape. You're really Shang Huaming's disciple?" The 100 Herbs Gate disciple was also stunned, his face full of shock. "But, I heard the young master say that Shang Huaming's gate master and two of his disciples have already died. He didn't say there were any survivors." Gate master and senior brothers, they're already gone?" When Xiaohua heard that the gate master and two of his senior brothers had already died, his heart was filled with grief. Just now, he had made the most extreme guess, but he never thought that 3 living people would completely disappear in a single night. When he heard this, his body unconsciously swayed in the air, and the gate master's generosity and his 2 senior brothers' closeness immediately appeared before his eyes. 3 years of happiness with Shang Huaming flashed before his eyes like a merry-go-round, and Xiaohua unconsciously bit his lips tightly. Seeing Xiaohua so sad, the 100 Herbs Gate disciple was even more convinced. After hesitating for a moment, he probed, "Little brother, don't be sad, Fairy Xiao is still alive." Senior sister is still alive?" Hearing that his senior sister was actually still alive, Xiao Hua was pleasantly surprised and hurriedly said, "Senior brothers, please." At this point, Xiao Hua's heart trembled. "I, Shang Huoming, am weak and only have 5 people. The gate master and 2 of my senior brothers have all died. So I, Shang Huoming, can be considered to have been destroyed. I'm the only one left in the gate master. No, I haven't been accepted into Shang Huoming's sect, so I can't be considered his disciple. To be honest, Shang Huoming only has senior sister as his only descendant. First of all, senior sister has some feelings for the 100 Herbs Gate's young master. After Shang Huoming was destroyed, she was all alone and had no one to rely on. Who knows, she might walk together with Jiang Fan. Besides, the 100 Herbs Gate came in large numbers. Needless to say, they're definitely using the banner of my Shang Huoming's alliance to occupy Yellow Flower Ridge. Just based on this, senior sister's life is in danger. Thinking about his experience from Yellow Flower Ridge to Medicine Known Peak, Xiao Hua shuddered a little. Then he thought of Shang Huoming's inexplicable disaster falling from the sky and had a deeper understanding of the life and death struggle in the cultivation world. After some thought, he made a plan in his heart. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, "I wonder when senior sister Xiao will return from Medicine Known Peak to Yellow Flower Ridge." Fairy Xiao returned more than a month ago. The 100 Herbs Gate disciples were almost certain that Xiao Hua was Shang Huoming's disciple. Besides, he was only in the 2nd layer of the aura refining realm, so the 2 5th layer aura refining disciples didn't take him seriously at all. They casually said, "It was our young master who sent Fairy Xiao back." It was precisely because young master encountered this matter that the gate master sent Elder Xing to bring us here, to help. The disciple looked at Xiao Hua and actually changed the last 2 words to help, causing Xiao Hua to feel a burst of disgust. More than a month ago? Xiao Hua felt disgust, but he didn't feel surprised. In his memory, he had fallen into a coma because he encountered Little White's tribulation last night. He thought he was only unconscious for 1 night, but he didn't expect it to be for 30 days. That's right, junior brother. Our 100 Herbs Gate has already been in Yellow Flower Ridge for dozens of days and searched this place for a long time, but we didn't find any traces of living people. Junior brother, where did you go? A 100 Herbs Gate disciple asked. This? Xiao Hua hesitated slightly. Just as he was about to speak, he saw several figures rapidly flying over from the direction of Mindless Worship Peak. Before the person in the lead arrived, a rough voice sounded. "Where did this brat come from? Don't you know how powerful our 100 Herbs Gate is?" When the crowd flew closer, they saw a pale, young man, and his cultivation was pitifully low. They couldn't help but be stunned. "It's this person? Martial uncle. This person says he's Shang Huoming's disciple." One of the 100 Herbs Gate disciples said in a low voice. "How is that possible? Aside from Xiao Xinrui, all of Shang Huoming's people are already dead." The rough voice belonged to a dark-skinned man about 40 years old. He waved his hand in disbelief. At this moment, a disciple behind this person flew a few steps forward and whispered a few words in his ear. Xiao Hua looked. This disciple seemed to be the one who gave him the withered seed. Is that so? Are you sure? Martial Uncle Xing, who was at the 11th level of Qi refining, glared at the disciple. The disciple was clearly stunned and stammered. This disciple saw him at Medicine Farmer Peak, but I can't be sure. Xiao Hua's heart thumped, and his eyes began to scan his surroundings. He believed that if this martial Uncle Xing had any ill intentions towards him, he should be able to escape with his speed. With his understanding of the terrain of Yellow Flower Ridge, he should be able to escape with his life. However, in his heart, he still wanted to see Xiao Xinrui again. He wanted to see if this unfortunate senior sister of his was still alive. Seeing that the disciple's tone had changed, Martial Uncle Xing's eyes narrowed. However, when he saw that Xiao Hua was only at the 2nd level of Qi refining, he frowned and looked at him for a while, as if thinking about something. Xiao Hua's heartstrings were taut. He was just waiting for him to make any strange movements and escape. Martial Uncle Xing sighed softly in his heart, waved his hand, and said to the disciple next to him, "Since he's Shang Huoming's disciple, take him to the young master." At this moment, the young master is accompanying Xiao Xinrui. At the back mountain of mindless worship peak, the disciple who had spoken just now glanced at martial Uncle Xing and cupped his hands. This disciple obeys. Then, he flew in front of Xiao Hua and said coldly, "Let's go. Follow me." Xiao Hua's heart chilled. He had already cursed the 100 Herbs Gate in his heart. This is the back mountain of mindless worship peak. Do I need you to lead the way? However, he still smiled and cupped his hands. Thank you for your trouble, senior brother. The disciple glanced at him again and seemed to be very dissatisfied with the way he was addressed. However, in front of everyone, he didn't say anything and flew away. Xiao Hua cupped his hands at martial Uncle Xing and the others, then slowed down. Like a second-level qi refining disciple, he slowly flew towards mindless worship peak. The place that the disciple was leading him to was none other than Shang Huaming's secret chamber. At this moment, the door to the secret chamber was wide open, and a yellow talisman was stuck in front of the cave, allowing anyone to enter. The disciple flew to the cave and cupped his hands, reporting to the young master, Shang Huaming found. A living disciple. Ah? A cry of surprise came from inside the cave. It was Xiao Xinrui's voice. Is it Xiao Hua? The first voice was still in the cave, but when the last word came out, Xiao Xinrui had already rushed out of the secret chamber. Senior sister, Xiao Hua's eyes were filled with tears as he also rushed over. Xiao Xinrui's footsteps were somewhat staggered. She didn't look like a cultivator at all. As soon as she saw Xiao Hua's tall and thin figure and familiar face, she couldn't help but throw herself at him. She had just called out Xiao Hua, when sorrow arose from her heart, and she couldn't help but wail loudly. She threw herself into the arms of her only family member in this world. Xiao Hua was very tall, half a head taller than Gong Mingwei. Xiao Xinrui threw herself into his arms, but she could only touch his chest. Woo-woo, Xiao Xinrui cried extremely sorrowfully. Her tears flowed out like spring water, and in a moment, the front of Xiao Hua's Taoist robe was completely soaked. -5. Chapter 1281. Xiao Hua originally thought that he was strong. When he heard the news of Xiao Yuehong, Gong Mingwei, and Zhang Qingxiao, he wasn't too sad. But now that Xiao Xinrui was crying, he couldn't help it. His tears fell on Xiao Xinrui's hair. In the midst of his tears, Xiao Hua suddenly felt a cold air coming from the front. He was slightly stunned and glanced slightly. Wasn't it the young master of Baichao Gate, Jiang Fan? Xiao Hua thought to himself. Xiao Xinrui was Jiang Fan's sweetheart. At this time, she was crying in his arms. What was this? Although he was Xiao Xinrui's junior brother and was much younger than Xiao Xinrui, but, after all, they weren't related by blood. Xiao Hua's body couldn't help but stiffen. Perhaps because she had cried enough, Xiao Xinrui's soft body seemed to feel Xiao Hua's stiffness and also moved slightly. Xiao Hua barely held back his tears. When he was about to find an excuse, Jiang Fan in front of him said gently, "Sister Rui, cry a little longer. In these dozens of days, except for the first cry, you haven't shed a single tear. I know you've been holding back your grief in your heart and don't want me to see it. Xiao Hua is back, and you're not the only one left from Shang Huaming. You can be considered to have a companion. Cry happily, Brother Fan." Hearing this, Xiao Xinrui seemed to be extremely moved. She pushed Xiao Hua away, turned around, and threw herself into Jiang Fan's arms and cried. Xiao Hua looked at her and felt extremely uncomfortable. The mountain wind blew, and the tears on Xiao Hua's chest turned from warm to cold. It was so cold that it reached his heart. But soon, the tears were blown away by the mountain wind, and there were no traces left. After a while, Xiao Hua wiped away the tears in his eyes. He looked up at Jiang Fan, who was holding Xiao Xinrui's waist with one hand and stroking her hair with the other. He smiled and nodded slightly. At this time, Jiang Feng was as handsome as jade, and his eyes were also kind. He also nodded at Xiao Hua. Xiao Xinrui's crying gradually stopped. She struggled out of Jiang Fan's arms and said in a low voice, "Brother Fan, I let you see a joke?" "Of course not. To let you cry out all your grief and not turn this tribulation into your heart's demon. This is what I should do." Brother Fan, you're the best. Xiao Xinrui's eyes were filled with gratitude as she forced a smile. I'm sorry for your loss, Sister Rui. What's done is done. It's useless to think too much about it. Jiang Fan patted Xiao Xinrui's shoulder and said sadly, Ah, I know. Xiao Xinrui said and turned her head. It wasn't until now that Xiao Hua carefully looked at Xiao Xinrui's face. He saw that in just a month's time, Xiao Xinrui's round face had lost a lot of weight, almost becoming an oval face. She was originally rich, but now she was even more beautiful and poignant. Perhaps it was because she had lost weight, but Xiao Xinrui's eyes had instead become a bit bigger. Her fine black hair was coiled up on her head, and a white flower was slanted into her sideburns. Xiao Hua knew that his senior sister had always liked red, and at this moment, her whole body was covered in white. At first glance, she looked extremely elegant and even more refreshing than before. Senior sister, sect master, Without waiting for Xiao Xinrui to speak, Xiao Hua asked first. Alas, come in? Xiao Xinrui's face darkened as she walked into the secret room. Xiao Hua, where have you been for the past 1 month? We searched the entire Yellow Flower Ridge but couldn't find any trace of you. Without waiting for Xiao Hua to walk, Jiang Fan asked with a smile, his tone full of concern. Alas, where else could I have gone? Sect Master said that Junior didn't have enough black tuber grass from young Sect Master Jiang. After Big Senior Brother and Second Senior Brother sent Senior Sister out, Junior was sent to the depths of Yellow Flower Ridge to search for black tuber grass. Young Sect Master knows Junior's cultivation level. There are many ferocious beasts in the depths of Yellow Flower Ridge. Junior didn't dare to go too fast and could only search carefully. That's why I was delayed. Xiao Hua said with a smile. What about the black tuber grass? Jiang Fan asked again. Young Sect Master, if the black tuber grass was so easy to pick, Junior wouldn't need to go to Yaonong Peak to look for young Sect Master. Because Junior didn't manage to pick it, Junior kept delaying and only returned now. Oh, right. Junior planted some of the black tuber grass that young Sect Master gave Junior in Shihua Peak's medicine garden. However, Junior's level of planting medicine is limited, so Junior didn't live much. Jiang Fan was skeptical. Looking at Xiao Hua's bald head, he asked curiously, What's wrong with your hair? It wasn't like this when you were at Yaonong Peak. Xiao Hua's heart thumped, and he smiled apologetically. Sigh. This Junior was accompanying Sect Master to concoct pills when I accidentally dozed off and was burned by the earth fire. Even though Sect Master heard the news and rushed over, it was still a lot less, so this Junior might as well cut it all off. Oh, Senior Sister knows about this. Senior Sister didn't tell young Sect Master? That day, Second Senior Brother laughed at Junior a lot. Speaking of Second Senior Brother, Xiao Hua's voice became lower and lower. Xiao Xinrui was leading the way. When she heard Jiang Fan's question, she first stopped, her face expressionless. When she heard Xiao Hua mention her, she just noticed that Xiao Hua was different. Hearing Xiao Hua mention her, she clenched her teeth and scolded. A boy refining pills fell asleep while guarding the pill furnace, and you still have the nerve to mention it? How could I mention this to others? Yes, Senior Sister is right. Seeing Xiao Xinrui help him cover up his lie, Xiao Hua hurriedly said. Jiang Fan frowned slightly, but his face showed that he believed it. After all, the disciples sent by 100 Herbs Gate were arranged around the Great Array, and there weren't many disciples in the depths of Yellow Flower Ridge. If Xiao Hua came from there, it was normal that he wasn't discovered. Go. Sect Master Xiao and Senior Brother Gong's remains are inside. Jiang Fan sighed and waved his hand. Huh, only the remains of 2 people? Xiao Hua was surprised, but he didn't dare to ask more. When they entered the secret chamber, they saw that it was empty. There were only 3 jade coffins placed on a platform that was half the height of a person. The jade was transparent, and Xiao Hua saw Xiao Yuehong's pale and familiar face in the middle coffin. Xiao Yuehong was wearing a navy blue Taoist robe, and his eyes were closed as if he was sleeping soundly. However, there were faintly visible cracks on his face, and some parts of his face were missing. Indeed, Xiao Yuehong's death was very tragic. Looking at the left side of Xiao Yuehong's coffin, Gong Mingwei was lying there quietly, and he also looked like he was sleeping soundly. There were no fatal wounds. The rightmost coffin was empty, and there was only a Taoist robe inside. Sect Master. Although Xiaohua tried to suppress his emotions, he couldn't help but feel sad when he saw that peaceful face. He quickly stepped forward, knelt on the ground, and kowtowed. After he finished kowtowing to the 3 coffins, he pointed to Zhang Qingxiao's empty coffin, turned his head and asked, "Second senior brother's remains, Xiaohua." Xiao Xinrui's eyes were filled with tears again. She opened her mouth and called out, "Brother Fan, please tell Xiaohua." Xiaohua, a month ago, after Senior Brother Gong and Senior Brother Zhang sent your senior sister to my Medicine Farmer Peak, they didn't stay in my 100 Herbs Gate for long and immediately returned to Yellow Flower Ridge. And after Sister Rue played in my Medicine Farmer Peak for 2 days, she was sent back to Yellow Flower Ridge by me and my disciples. When we arrived at Yellow Flower Ridge that day, your Shang Huaming's formation didn't have any abnormalities, but Sister Rue's message talisman didn't fly out. We were surprised and followed her into Shang Huaming's formation. There were also no abnormalities at Wanxi Peak, but we couldn't find Sect Master Xiao and the others. In the end, we found Senior Brother Gong's remains near the left side of Cherishing Flower Peak, as well as the destroyed flying boat. Then, we found Senior Brother Zhang's torn and blood-stained Taoist robe next to the cold pond. Although Senior Brother Zhang's remains haven't been found after such a long time, I'm afraid that he fell into the cold pond and was washed away by the water. Then, second Senior Brother may not have fallen. Xiaohua had a glimmer of hope in his heart. Xiaohua, I also hope that Senior Brother Zhang is alive, but he was with Senior Brother Gong and the flying boat was destroyed. Moreover, Senior Brother Gong's body was killed by an extremely powerful person with a high-level magic art. Do you think Senior Brother Zhang could have escaped? Zhang Fan said bitterly. Xiaohua was silent. In his heart, he also knew that to be able to kill Xiao Yuehong and even the little white dragon, this divine ability was absolutely not something that Gong Mingwei and Zhang Qingxiao could contend against. Although he couldn't see Zhang Qingxiao's corpse, she was definitely dead. After taking a look at Xiaohua, Zhang Fan then points at Xiao Yuehong's remains and says, "After Senior Marshal Brother Gong's remains were found, we never found Sect Leader Zhao's remains. It wasn't until in the end, in the mountain stream between Cherishing Flower Peak and Lone Staff Peak that we found some fragments and pieces of clothing that were scattered there. I asked the Sect's Foundation establishment elders to cast a spell, and only then was we able to collect Sect Leader Zhao's scattered remains and piece them together like this." Father. Hearing this, Xiao Xinrui couldn't help crying again. Xiao Hua's tears fell down with a pitter-patter sound. After waiting for Xiao Xinrui to stop crying, Zhang Fan said, "Sister Rue, this is good. You're not the only one in Shang Huaming. With Xiao Hua, you and him can support each other. With the support of our 100 Herbs Gate, Shang Huaming will have a chance to rise again in the future." Thinking of the actions of the 100 Herbs Gate's disciples just now, Xiao Hua's heart was like a mirror. If it weren't for his low cultivation level, which was only at the 2nd level of qi refining, he wouldn't have been able to cause any big waves. Maybe Marshal Uncle Xing would have already killed him. Then, Shang Huaming wouldn't have any disciples to meet with Xiao Xinrui and ignite Xiao Xinrui's idea of reviving Shang Huaming. Alas, Brother Fan, you've said it before. I've already said it many times. I, Shang Huaming, have already perished. There's no need to talk about reviving. And Xiaohua, presumably, Brother Fan also knows that although I call him Junior Brother, he's not the same as eldest Senior Brother and second Senior Brother. Father, he has never accepted Xiaohua as a disciple of Shang Huaming. How can he be qualified to revive Shang Huaming? If he revives Shang Huaming, wouldn't it become a big joke in our country of Xi? -5. Chapter 1282. I see. Zhang Fan was still concerned. This is Shang Huaming's internal affairs. I'd better not get involved. I'll listen to you. Xiao Xinrui shook her head slightly. When I opened Shang Huaming's inheritance palace, I entrusted Shang Huaming to Brother Fan. Whether Shang Huaming stays or not, I'll listen to Brother Fan. In fact, in my opinion, Shang Huaming and 100 Herbs Gate are allies. 100 Herbs Gate has a legitimate reason to occupy Shang Huaming. As a disciple of Shang Huaming, I have no objections. What trouble can others cause? When Xiao Hua heard this, he suddenly realized that he had been worried about Xiao Xinrui's safety just now. Now he knew that there must be many sects coveting Shang Huaming's death. Of course, the 10,000 Poisons sect, which had attacked Shang Huaming before, was one of them. However, the 100 Herbs sect was one step ahead of them and got Xiao Xinrui's approval, so it was justified. Although the strength was respected in the cultivation world, in the case of the same strength, of course, the status should be given. The 100 Herbs sect had Xiao Xinrui in their hands, which meant that they had taken the initiative to protect Xiao Xinrui. Of course, as for the future, when the cultivation world of Shi forgot about Shang Huaming, it was not something they could consider now. At the same time, Xiao Hua also understood that this was not only said to Jiang Fan, but more importantly, Xiao Xinrui said it to Xiao Hua. Sure enough, Xiao Xinrui turned to Xiao Hua and said, Xiao Hua, although father wanted to take you as a disciple of Shang Huaming that day, your cultivation couldn't enter the third level of qi refining. Father wanted to, but he couldn't do it properly. He couldn't break the rules of cultivation in qi, so you can't be considered a disciple of Shang Huaming. Now that Shang Huaming is no longer here, you don't have to use my identity as a disciple to cultivate. Then, he turned to Jiang Fan and said, Brother Fan, Xiao Hua's aptitude is really bad. You should take into account that he was once a disciple of my Shang Huaming and accept him into the 100 Herbs Gate first. We'll see how good his fortune is in the next few years. If he can reach the third layer of qi refining, then accept him as an official disciple. At least I'm worthy of his 3 years of hard work in my Shang Huaming. I'm worthy of my father's painstaking efforts. Hearing this, Jiang Fan looks embarrassed. Sister Rui, you also know that our 100 Herbs Gate has many disciples and the rules are extremely strict. At Xiao Hua's age, with such a low cultivation, he would have already been crippled and expelled from Medicine Nong Peak. Then, he looked at Xiao Hua and said with a smile, however, Xiao Hua does have some knowledge of medicinal plants. When he came to my 100 Herbs Gate, he didn't forget to ask for some seeds to study for himself. That's something I admire very much. Moreover, since Sister Rui has spoken up to this point, I have to listen to Sister Rui for once. Let's take him into our 100 Herbs Gate as an apprentice to plant herbs. A boy who grows herbs in the 100 Herbs Gate? When Xiao Hua heard this, he couldn't help but sneer inwardly. The entire mountain was filled with disciples of the 100 Herbs sect. If he, a second-layer aura refining cultivator, mingled among them, wouldn't his fate be to be bullied? Furthermore, his low cultivation level was not a problem of aptitude. If he had stayed in the 100 Herbs Gate, how could he have stood out one day? Even if he didn't die, he wouldn't reach the third layer of aura refining. Xiao Xinrui, of course, thought more than Xiao Hua. She said timidly, Xiao Hua's aptitude is not good. His cultivation level can improve, and in the end, he may not be able to plant herbs. Brother Fan, can you give Xiao Hua a disciple title? Absolutely not, Sister Rui. It's not that I don't want to listen to you, but the iron rule of our 100 Herbs Gate is that only disciples in the third layer of aura refining can be accepted into the gate. Shang Huaming can't accept him, and our 100 Herbs Gate can't accept him either. Moreover, to be honest with Sister Rui, our 100 Herbs Gate also has requirements in terms of age. Xiao Hua, I'm afraid, he's already broken the rules. So if Xiao Hua stays in the 100 Herbs Gate, and in the future, if he can't reach the third layer of aura refining, what if he's kicked out of the 100 Herbs Gate one day? Will his cultivation be crippled? Xiao Xinrui said after thinking for a moment. Sister Rui, you don't have to worry about this. What you said is true, but I'm in charge of the 100 Herbs Gate in the future. As long as I'm here, I can guarantee that this kind of thing won't happen. Jiang Fan patted his chest and said, I can't make the decision for Xiao Hua. This is all I can do. Thank you, Brother Fan. Xiao Xinrui looked back at Xiao Hua and said, You heard this kind of powerful relationship? If you stay here, you'll have the protection of the 100 Herbs Gate, and your life won't be in danger. In the future, young Master Jiang has already promised you. But if you leave now, I'll make the decision for my father and kick you out of Shang Huaming. In the future, you'll no longer be his disciple. Your You're not a disciple anyway. You're just a boy who plants herbs. Your cultivation. Forget it. You've just broken through to the second layer of aura refining. For the sake of our past relationship, I won't abolish your cultivation. As for whether you go or stay, you can decide for yourself. Xiao Xinrui sighed and turned to look at her father's coffin, ignoring Xiao Hua. Although Xiao Hua had already made up his mind, he still pretended to think. After a long time, he cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, senior sister. Wrong? Whether you stay or leave, I'm no longer your senior sister." Xiao Xinrui looked back and shook her head with a wry smile. "Yes, thank you for your kindness, Fairy Xiao." Junior thought for a long time. This 100 Herbs Gate is a place of hidden dragons and crouching tigers. Junior's aptitude is very poor. Here, I'm afraid I'll never be able to make a name for myself. Moreover, Junior has always wanted to go out and find my origin. If I stay here, I'm afraid I won't have this opportunity again. So, I forgot that you still have this knot in your heart. Forget it, I was meddlesome. Xiao Xinrui nodded slightly. Maybe you're a disciple of some famous sect. If you make any mistakes here and someone finds you, we won't be able to explain it. No matter what my origin is, Junior will remember these 3 years in Yellow Flower Ridge. Thank you, Fairy Xiao and Sect Leader Xiao, for taking me in. Xiao Hua bowed again. Well, in that case, Xiao Hua, you take care of yourself. Xiao Xinrui's face gradually became cold. After thinking for a moment, she took off the storage bag from her waist and handed it to Xiao Hua. I have nothing to give you. Take this storage bag and some yellow talismans. Without these, I'm afraid you won't be able to go far out of Yellow Flower Ridge. Xiao Hua was just about to reach out and take it, but his eyes saw Jiang Fan's smiling face. He immediately withdrew his hand and said, "Thank you, Fairy Xiao, for your generous gift. You don't have to give me this storage bag. Just give me a few yellow talismans to protect myself." Hearing Xiao Hua's rejection, Xiao Xinrui's eyes suddenly lit up with regret. She clapped her hands and took out a stack of yellow talismans. Then, after a little hesitation, she took out several jade bottles and handed them to Jiang Fan. "Brother Fan, I'll have to trouble you to give these yellow talismans and some wucheng pills to Xiao Hua." "Well, okay." Jiang Fan, who was beside Xiao Xinrui, reached out and took them. He immediately scanned the yellow talismans and jade bottles several times with his divine sense before handing them to Xiao Hua. Although Xiao Hua didn't have divine sense, he could still perceive divine sense. He sneered in his heart. Xiao Hua took the yellow talisman and put it in his arms. Just as he was about to leave, he saw Xiao Xinrui's hand turn over and take out a colorful object from the storage bag. It was the peacock fantasy that Xiao Xinrui had bought in the market before. Xiao Hua and Jiang Fan didn't know what she was going to do, so they just watched quietly. Xiao Xinrui stared at it for a long time, then raised her eyes and said, "Xiao Hua, the yellow talismans just now can be regarded as my reward for your 3 years of hard work. The Wu Tsang pills are for you to heal yourself in case you encounter any danger in the future. This, the peacock illusion, is not a magic tool. I remember that you and second senior brother liked it very much. I will give it to you on behalf of second senior brother and wish you a happy birthday." After listening to Xiao Xinrui's words, Xiao Hua suddenly realized that today was his 3rd year in Shanghuaming. Because he didn't know his own birthday, Xiao Yueheng took the day he met Xiao Hua and brought him to Yellow Flower Ridge as Xiao Hua's birthday. Moreover, Xiao Hua also knew that today was also Xiao Xinrui's birthday. At that time, Xiao Yueheng was rushing back to celebrate Xiao Xinrui's birthday, so he met Xiao Hua on the way. This gift is a bit too much. Xiao Xinrui, this junior is afraid that this junior can't afford it. Xiao Hua's heart was desolate. This peacock illusion was originally Xiao Yueheng's birthday gift to Xiao Xinrui. He didn't want to take away Xiao Yueheng's good intentions from Xiao Xinrui. "It's not that expensive. That day, I just liked it, so I fought with Brother Fan. If we didn't fight, this thing wouldn't be worth a few pills. Don't you think so, Brother Fan?" That's right. At that time, I was also curious, so I made Sister Rue unhappy." Jiang Fan certainly knew the value of this peacock illusion, so he said without thinking, "Yes, It's also because of this peacock illusion that I met Brother Fan. Now that I'm with Brother Fan, this thing is not that important. Xiao Xinrui's face was a little red. She handed the peacock illusion to Zhang Fan and said, "Give it to him." This time, Zhang Fan took the peacock illusion and didn't even use his divine sense. He passed it to Xiao Hua. When he was in E-City, he didn't know how many times he used his divine sense to check this thing. There was absolutely nothing strange about it. Xiao Hua sighed and took it with his hands. He cupped his hands and thanked Xiao Xinrui. "Thank you, Xiao Xinrui, for your generous gift." "Well, Xiao Hua, you have nothing to do with this place. Go down the mountain." Xiao Xinrui turned to Zhang Fan and said, "Brother Fan, I'm not feeling well. Can you accompany me to send Xiao Hua out?" "Hee, of course. I dare not disobey Sister Rui's orders." Zhang Fan smiled and nodded. Xiao Xinrui's face was a little red. Xiao Hua looked at the two of them deeply and took the lead to leave the secret room. Outside the secret room, the disciple who brought Xiao Hua here was still waiting outside. When he saw Xiao Hua and others come out, he cupped his hands and saluted Zhang Fan. "Go. Inform the disciples to open the array. I will send Xiao Hua down the mountain. In addition, inform the elders of this matter. Forget it, there's no need to say anything. He doesn't know that Shang Huoming has a disciple who hasn't entered the sect. Expelling a disciple who hasn't entered the sect isn't something to brag about." -5. Chapter 1283. When the disciple heard Zhang Fan's order, he was obviously surprised, but then he quickly bowed and said, "This disciple will go and send the message." After saying that, he couldn't help but glance at Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua lowered his head and didn't look up, but his slightly moving eyes took in everything. "Let's go." Zhang Fan came to Xiao Xinrui's side and very naturally held her sleeve. He smiled and said, "You're not feeling well. Come with me." "Thank you, Brother Fan." Xiao Xinrui's face was still slightly red, but that red was very obvious on her pale and thin face. Just like the sunset glow, poignant. Xiao Hua sighed in his heart for no reason. His mind was full of the voices and smiles of Xiao Yuehong, Gong Mingwei, and Zhang Qingxiao. The three faces intertwined and gradually blurred. Zhang Fan flew in front of Xiao Hua with Xiao Xinrui, but Xiao Hua didn't dare to overtake him. He just held his body and flew bit by bit, just like a second-level qi refining disciple. Zhang Fan seemed to be testing him, or maybe it was unintentional. He flew very fast and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and watched for a while, then snorted from his nose. Zhang Fan was at the peak of the 12th level of qi refining, but his escape light was not much faster than Xiao Hua's. If Xiao Hua wanted to catch up, it wouldn't take much effort. However, from the conversation just now, Xiao Hua could see that although Xiao Xinrui had feelings for Zhang Fan and wanted to rely on the 100 Herbs Gate, she also wanted to protect him. She didn't tell Zhang Fan about his affairs in detail. In Zhang Fan's eyes, he should be the image of a useless person. If he wanted to safely get out of Yellow Flower Ridge, he had to endure it again and again. Fortunately, Yellow Flower Ridge belonged to someone. How could Xiao Hua not know the way out? Xiao Hua flew slowly along the countless routes he had taken before, and he looked like he was doing his best. However, right at this moment, a sudden change occurred. A screen of light suddenly appeared in the sky, and it instantly enveloped Xiao Hua within it. As the light barrier fell down, it immediately emitted an intense and resplendent brilliance. It rapidly absorbed the surrounding spiritual energy, and in the blink of an eye, numerous blade-like objects appeared within the light barrier. These objects were actually formed from the spiritual energy of the world, and these blade-like objects constantly rotated, just like a spinning windmill. Windblade. When Xiao Hua saw this, his eyes unconsciously shrunk. He had heard Zhang Qingxiao talk about this windblade before. It was a great enemy of qi condensation cultivators. Xiao Hua saw countless rotating wind blades above the light barrier. They were like incomparably sharp steel blades. The moment Xiao Hua recognized them, they all left the light barrier and shot towards Xiao Hua from all directions, drawing countless strange trajectories in the air. Xiao Hua was greatly shocked when he saw this. He only wore an ordinary Taoist robe and didn't possess any defensive ability. There was a stack of yellow talismans in his bosom, but he reckoned that they were all low-level goods that would absolutely collapse upon contact if used to resist the wind blades produced by this grand formation. What's going on? At the same time, Xiaohua was terrified, but at the same time, he immediately started to think. He didn't quite understand. Could it be that they want to silence me? Impossible? Xiaohua immediately dispelled this idea, because Xiao Xinrui had already predicted this situation. First, she specifically ordered him to be sent out of Yellow Flower Ridge. If Zhang Fan wanted to kill him, he wouldn't do it here. After leaving Yellow Flower Ridge, there would be plenty of opportunities. Xiaohua suddenly had a flash of inspiration. He immediately woke up. This guy is really testing my depth. It's because I haven't appeared for a month that they became suspicious. But since Xiao Xinrui didn't ask, they also can't say anything. Humph, I'm just a little disciple at the second level of qi condensation. Is it worth it to do this? Thus, after a brief moment of shock, Xiaohua immediately took out a stack of yellow talismans from his bosom in a flurry, and then frantically searched for defensive yellow talismans. That expression was simply extremely embarrassing. Sure enough, just as Xiaohua thought, the yellow talismans in his bosom were extremely low level. Just as the defensive Golden Bell talisman was about to be used, the wind blades flew in front of him. With just 2 or 3 wind blades, the light protecting Xiaohua's body was scattered. Help! Xiaohua shouted himself hoarse. His legs were trembling. If it weren't for the wind blades below him, he would have already fallen from the sky. Seeing that the wind blades were about to pierce Xiaohua's skin, Xiaohua was still looking for yellow talismans in a flurry. But the corner of his eyes kept slanting to the side. With a ding sound, a familiar voice sounded. Oh, it's Junior Brother Xiao? Xiaohua pretended to be panicked and looked up. In midair, a ray of sunlight shone down, and a gap about the height of a person was opened. The disciple who had just sent a message in front of him stretched half of his body out and shouted, "Quickly come up!" Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent and immediately flew out of the gap. Looking at Xiaohua's pale face, that disciple cupped his hands and said, "Junior Brother Xiao, my apologies. This Yellow Flower Ridge's great formation had just been set up. This one still had some carelessness. Please forgive me." Xiaohua nodded with lingering fear and said, I don't dare. This one also thought it was the same as before and didn't pay attention at all. Alas, even if you paid attention, I'm afraid you can't avoid it. That disciple nodded in satisfaction and said with a smile, "Junior Brother Xiao, don't be afraid." Embarrassed. Previously, your Shang Huoming's great formation. Alas, it really couldn't withstand a single blow. My 100 Herbs Gate had no choice but to set up more great formations. Senior is wrong. Xiaohua also shook his head. This one has already been expelled from Shang Huoming. I'm no longer his disciple. Whatever Senior says has nothing to do with this one. Oh, I forgot. The disciple woke up and said, "Let's go. I will lead the way. You follow carefully." When Xiaohua followed that disciple out, Xiao Xinrui was standing outside chatting with Zhang Fan. Xiaohua had just appeared in the great formation when Xiao Xinrui saw him. The trace of anxiety in her eyes disappeared. She frowned and said coldly, "Xiaohua, why did you come so late?" "Alas, your cultivation. In the future, you'll have to practice a lot. You're not even familiar with flying talismans?" Xiaohua's face turned red and he said embarrassedly, "This junior knows. This junior will definitely practice hard in the future." Alas, what's the use of practicing hard? You'll be a rogue cultivator once you leave Yellow Flower Ridge. What future can you have? Xiao Xinrui looked at Zhang Fan and said, "I was just chatting with Brother Fan. I heard that the Huan Hua sect is recruiting disciples again. If you have the heart to practice, you might as well go and take a look." Huan Hua sect? Xiao Hua was stunned. He had never heard of this name. The Huan Hua sect is a big sect in the country of Xi. It's different from my 100 Herbs sect. They don't stick to one pattern when they recruit disciples. They don't only look at your foundation and aptitude. If you have the opportunity, even if you don't have the talent for cultivation, you can still be accepted into the sect. Zhang Fan said with a smile. However, because of this, the Huan Hua sect has a bad reputation for teaching everyone regardless of background. I was just talking with Sister Rue. This place is quite suitable for you. Teaching everyone regardless of background? Does it mean that there are all kinds of disciples? Xiao Hua's eyes lit up and he asked curiously, Yes, that's right. The reason why they are called big sects is because of this. Xiao Xinrui nodded. Although your aptitude is extremely poor, I think that even a loose sect like the Huanhua sect may not be able to accept you. But, after all, this is still an opportunity. Go and take a look. Yes, Junior understands. Xiao Hua bowed. Xiao Xinrui, please point out the direction. Xiao Xinrui looked deeply at Xiao Hua and pointed in the direction of the Huanhua sect. She waved her hand and said, Go. From now on, in the country of Xi, in the Xiaoyu continent, there will be no more Shang Huoming's name. You are also a rogue cultivator. Xiao Hua felt a burst of misery in his heart. He nodded silently and once again bowed deeply to Xiao Xinrui. After cupping his hands to Jiang Fan and the others, he turned around and flew in the direction of the Huanhua sect. His speed was still very slow, so slow that Jiang Fan could catch up with him if he used his magic power. After flying for a while, Xiao Hua suddenly looked back. In the distance, Xiao Xinrui was still standing there. Although he didn't know whether she was looking at him or not, Xiao Hua's heart felt warm. She must be worried about him. Of course, maybe she was worried about others. Knowing Xiao Xinrui's thoughts, Xiao Hua wasn't in a hurry. He flew at the speed of the second layer of qi refining for a while. He felt that the divine sense that had just swept over him had disappeared. This time, his expression changed. He used his magic power and used all his strength to fly in another direction. After flying for a while, he immediately lowered his altitude and flew back in the direction of the Yellow Flower Ridge. It took him more than an hour to fly out of the Yellow Flower Ridge. It took him the time to drink a cup of tea to circle around the ridge. It only took him the time to eat a meal to return to the other direction of the Yellow Flower Ridge. The difference in speed was absolutely huge. The Yellow Flower Ridge was still covered in white fog, just like before. But Xiao Hua knew that the Yellow Flower Ridge was absolutely different from before. Perhaps the legends in the world were still circulating, and the protagonist of the Yellow Flower Ridge had changed to someone else. At this time, it was really noon. The hot sun hung above his head. Xiao Hua squinted his eyes and stared at the Yellow Flower Ridge not far away for a long time. Then, he landed and searched all over the mountain. Xiao Hua wasn't familiar with the surroundings of the Yellow Flower Ridge, but Zhang Qingxiao was very familiar with it. She had been noisy in Xiao Hua's ears all day long. Xiao Hua naturally knew that there were some more hidden caves in the mountains outside the Yellow Flower Ridge. When Xiao Hua really found a cave and entered it, he used a stone to block the entrance of the cave. He couldn't help but think of his second senior brother, and his boiling hot tears flowed down his cheeks. Usually, they didn't feel any affection for each other. Sometimes, Zhang Qingxiao would bully him from time to time. Every time, Gong Mingwei would stand up and uphold justice for him. These things, he had never thought about them before, and he didn't think much of it, but now, hiding in the cave that Zhang Qingxiao had once spoken of, those scenes of the past came one after another, endlessly gushing out. It was as if his rolling tears had no end. -5. Chapter 1284. After letting the tears flow freely for a while, Xiao Hua stretched out his hand and wiped them away. Xiao Xinrui, as a woman, could endure for his safety, so why couldn't he hide the sorrow in the bottom of his heart? It was dark inside the cave. Xiao Hua sat cross-legged with his eyes closed, thinking quietly. Yes, from the moment he learned of Xiao Yuehong's death, until he met Xiao Xinrui, until he left Yellow Flower Ridge, he didn't ask about the cause of Xiao Yuehong's death, nor did he ask who the murderer was. If it wasn't the 100 Herbs sect, then it must be the 10,000 Poisons sect. These two sects definitely have something to do with it. Xiao Hua mused. This Bai Chao Min is even more suspicious. Zhang Min did not meet with danger early or late, but when Xiao Xinrui went to the Bai Chao Min, Gong Mingwei and Zhang Qingxiao went to deliver her, he met with danger? This must be a trap set by the 100 Herbs sect. Yes, it must be. They first used the banner of an alliance, and then they tried to unite by marriage. They made 2 preparations. That day, Sect leader didn't agree to their marriage, so they made the first move and killed me, Shang Huaming. Then they entered Yellow Flower Ridge with the identity of an alliance and controlled senior sister. Even if others had some complaints, it was justified and no one could do anything about it. Of course, the 10,000 Poisons sect is also suspicious, but if the 10,000 Poisons sect killed sect leader and 2 senior brothers that day, they should have occupied Yellow Flower Ridge immediately. They definitely wouldn't have waited for my senior sister to come back from Medicine Farmer Peak and be occupied by the 100 Herbs sect. Right, what about Little White? What happened to Little White? That day, it was undergoing its lightning tribulation. Spirit beasts that can undergo lightning tribulation are all at the Foundation establishment stage. This is what second senior brother said. It can definitely help sect master. Xiao Hua thought of Little White who was undergoing its lightning tribulation. I don't know the strength of the 10,000 Poison sect, but sect leader said that the 100 Herb sect has several elders in the Foundation establishment stage. It seems that Little White was either killed by the elders of the 100 Herbs sect or driven away by them. Xiao Hua was more and more certain that the 100 Herb sect was the culprit who killed Xiao Yuehong, Gong Mingwei, and Zhang Qingxiao. Even Zhang Fan's gentle smile was seen by him as hiding evil intentions. Humph, you want to test yours truly's cultivation? Do you think yours truly is that stupid? Xiao Hua thought angrily. Poor senior martial sister. In order to save her life, she can only feel wronged. I hope this young Master Jiang will treat senior martial sister a little better. If he treats senior sister a little better, I might consider not taking his life in the future. If he makes senior sister feel wronged in the slightest, I'll cut him into 7 or 8 pieces first. Yes. Also, although senior sister wants me to go to the Huanhua sect, in reality, she doesn't want me to go to the Huanhua sect. This is a smokescreen. But where can I go now? 100 Herbs Gate will definitely chase after me. If they can't catch up to me, they'll probably guess that I'm somewhere around Yellow Flower Ridge. I'll wait until it's dark before I leave. This time, I'll definitely fly far away. I can't let 100 Herbs Gate sense anything. Where are we going? Xiao Hua was at a loss. Ever since he woke up, he had been staying in Yellow Flower Ridge for the past 3 years. Apart from the last time he went to the Medicine Farmer Peak, he had never gone out. Regarding this country of Shi, what Dawn Rain continent, it was all pitch black. The overseas celestial clan? Maybe they can find my origin. Can I get a ship to go out to sea? Xiao Hua still pondered. If I can get a trace of memory from tracing light, I'm almost certain that if I can break tracing light, I'll be able to find out my origin. But this thing, who knows how to break it? I'm afraid it's too far to put all my hope on tracing light. Maybe I won't have an answer even if I die of old age. It's better to cultivate while searching Dawn Rain continent and see if I can dig out memories from tracing light. Just as Xiao Hua was pondering, 100 Herbs Gate, although they weren't the culprits Xiao Hua had identified, but they were doing what Xiao Hua had expected. Early on, Xiao Xinrui stood outside the great array of Yellow Flower Ridge. She waited until Xiao Hua's back could no longer be seen, but she still stood there. Let's go, Sister Rue. Xiao Hua has already gone far. He'll definitely be lucky if he goes to Huanhua sect, and will be accepted into the sect. You don't have to worry. After all, he has to walk his own path. As his senior sister, you've done your best. Alas, Brother Fan, you must know the pain in my heart. This Shang Huaming is gone just like that. I feel terrible. Although Xiao Hua isn't my disciple, once he leaves, my heart is also empty. Xiao Xinrui didn't avoid these things and told Zhang Fan the truth. I understand, Zhang Fan said with a smile. Nostalgia is human nature. Cultivators like us can't be free from vulgarity. Then I'll stay with you for a while. I hope that when you turn around and leave, you can face our beautiful future with a new mood. Thank you, Brother Fan. I understand. Xiao Xinrui nodded slightly and turned her head to look at the sky where Xiao Hua left. In fact, when she saw Xiao Hua flying at the speed of the 2nd level of the Qi refining realm, she was already relieved. She knew that before Xiao Hua broke through to the 2nd level of the Qi refining realm, his flying speed had already surpassed hers. Now that he had reached the 2nd level of the Qi refining realm, although she didn't pay attention to how fast he was flying, It was definitely much faster than what she saw just now. Xiao Xinrui's mouth unconsciously curved slightly, revealing a smile that she hadn't seen for a long time. She laughed in her heart and said, "This junior brother is not much worse than second senior brother." She stood there and waited for Jiang Fan to urge her again. Only then did Xiao Xinrui follow him into the great array of yellow flower ridge. When Jiang Fan turned around, he winked at the disciple standing next to him. The disciple nodded slightly. When both of them entered the great array, the disciple sent out a messaging charm. A dozen disciples of the 6th or 7th level of the Qi refining realm came out of the great array. They whispered in the disciple's ear and then chased after Xiao Hua. It wasn't until late at night that these disciples came back with tired faces. Looking at their depressed faces, it seemed that they didn't find anything. At this time, Jiang Fan was standing in the hall of Shang Huoming's former residence, pacing back and forth. From time to time, he would look up at the sky. Faintly, he muttered, "Junior brother Xing, can't you be a little more ruthless? You're making me so embarrassed." Jiang Fan scanned with his divine sense and knew that the disciples who were searching for Xiao Hua had returned. He quickly walked forward a few steps, but then his face changed color. At this time, outside the great array of yellow flower ridge, inside the cave, Xiao Hua had already made up his mind. "It doesn't matter where I go. The most important thing is to improve my strength. As long as my cultivation reaches the gold core realm, no. As long as I reach the late stage of the foundation establishment realm, I will be able to avenge the sect master. However, if I want to improve my cultivation, the first thing I have to do is to find spiritual plants and refine medicinal pills. Although the method of taking medicinal pills to improve my cultivation has its drawbacks, making my Dao foundation unstable, I don't have any other good methods. If there were any method to steadily improve my cultivation, I wouldn't drink poison to quench my thirst like this. The second thing I have to do is to find a cultivation method. Right now, I'm in the second layer of the aura refining realm, and I still have Shang Huoming's corresponding cultivation method to cultivate. Once I break through to the third layer of the aura refining realm, I'll be in a predicament where I have no cultivation method to use. In fact, if possible, it's best to find a cultivation method that can help me advance from the first layer to the 12th layer of the aura refining realm, once and for all. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua's eyes lit up. He stroked his ear and took out the summoning talisman that Kai Zhuoxia had given him from the space behind his head. He muttered, "100 Zhang Peak? An individual cultivator whose cultivation has reached the gold core realm?" Sect leader thought that I could always cultivate Shang Huoming's cultivation method until I reached the gold core realm. Unfortunately, that cultivation method has already fallen into Jiang Jiantong's hands. In the past, I naturally had to listen to sect leaders' orders. I didn't need to go to 100 Zhang Peak and didn't need to covet other people's cultivation methods. But now, I've already become an individual cultivator. For the sake of Elder 100 Zhang's gold core cultivation method, I have no choice but to go to 100 Zhang Peak. Finished thinking, Xiao Hua stood up from the ground, pushed aside the stones blocking the entrance of the cave, and came out of the cave. Borrowing the weak moonlight, he knelt down in front of Yellow Flower Ridge and kowtowed 9 times. He silently muttered a few words in his heart, stuck a flying talisman on his body, and flew up. The direction he was going was precisely where Huan Hua sect was located. Huh, what's this? Not long after Xiao Hua flew up, he happened to see an emerald green brilliance flashing under the mountain peak. That brilliance was extremely weak, only flashing for a moment. If Xiao Hua's 5 senses weren't sharp, he definitely wouldn't have been able to see it. At this time, Xiao Hua was already poor, so how could he let go of something that might be useful? When he landed and saw the thing on the ground, he couldn't help but frown. This thing was none other than the deity statue with a human body and a snake tail that Xiao Hua had seen in Shang Huaming's inheritance palace. This statue was leaning obliquely between the mountain rocks and messy grass. If it wasn't for the water-like moonlight, Xiao Hua definitely wouldn't have seen it in his hurry. Why is this deity statue here? Could it have been thrown out by 100 Herbs Gate? Xiao Hua lifted the statue and looked left and right. After confirming it, he suddenly realized what Gong Mingwei had said in the inheritance palace. Only sect leader and senior sister know the restrictions of the inheritance palace. I guess senior sister compromised and opened the restrictions of the inheritance palace. After 100 Herbs Gates, Zhang Fan obtained Shang Huaming's cultivation method. The inheritance palace would naturally be used for other purposes, and this statue was enshrined by Shang Huaming. 100 Herbs Gate probably has something they enshrine themselves. But Zhang Fan could have just destroyed this statue. At worst, he could have just thrown it in the depths of Yellow Flower Ridge. Why would it come here? Xiao Hua scratched his head. His previous guess was basically correct, but he wasn't Zhang Fan. He didn't know that Zhang Fan originally wanted to destroy this statue, but he didn't know what the statue was made of, so Zhang Fan couldn't destroy it no matter what. But if he threw it in Yellow Flower Ridge, and if Xiao Xinrui saw it, it would be hard to say. Therefore, he told his disciples to throw it far away. There were always lazy people. The disciple who threw the statue was not familiar with this place. After flying for a while, he was scared. So he threw it away and went back to report. Xiao Hua was also coincidental. He flew past here, so of course he could pick it up. Xiao Hua looked around again, but didn't see anything else. He exerted force in his hand, and with a thought, the statue suddenly disappeared. It was taken into the space of his mind. -5. Chapter 1285. Inside Yellow Flower Ridge, on top of Mincy Peak, Zhang Fan scanned with his divine sense and knew that his disciple had returned empty-handed. After the disciple reported back, he said coldly, Xiao Hua is just a boy who has just entered the second layer of qi refining. His flying speed is so slow. You, a dozen sixth-layer qi refining disciples actually spent an afternoon and several hours and still couldn't catch him? This disciple is stupid. This disciple and the others had estimated his flying speed and moved forward to search for him. Later on, when we saw that something was wrong, we spread out and searched the area within 100 miles. However, we didn't find any trace of him. Are you sure you've searched all the places? Zhang Fan asked coldly. Yes, young master. He went for less than 2 hours, at most a few hundred miles. Our speed is much faster than his. There's no reason we can't find him. The disciple was very puzzled. No reason? We just can't find him now. Zhang Fan snorted coldly. He flies slowly and his direction is fixed. Why can't we find him? Where could he have gone? Young master, this guy is only in the second layer of qi refining. His cultivation is pitifully low. What's the use of looking for him? If Xiao Xinzi finds out, how can you explain it to her? Nonsense, I was afraid she would be unhappy, so I didn't take him down in front of her. Listening to Zhang Fan's tone, he really treated Xiao Xinrui very well and didn't want her to be unhappy. But how was Shang Huaming killed? Our 100 Herbs Gate knows nothing. At that time, only Xiao Xinrui and Xiao Hua were at Yellow Flower Ridge. Since Xiao Xinrui has been killed, we can only ask Xiao Hua about it. Xiao Xinzi didn't ask because she knew she didn't have the ability to take revenge. But we can't. Since we have occupied Yellow Flower Ridge, we must know why Shang Huaming was killed. We can't repeat the same mistake. Xiao Hua said that he was sent to the depths of Yellow Flower Ridge to pick herbs. That does make some sense. But I've always wanted to ask in my heart. I understand now. Xiao Hua looks very simple and honest, but he's actually so shrewd. Have you searched the surroundings of Yellow Flower Ridge? Zhang Fan suddenly realized. No, I only searched in the direction of Huanhua sect. I also searched hundreds of miles away, but I didn't search around Yellow Flower Ridge. The disciple suddenly thought of something. Young sect master, you mean? Xiao Hua flew very slowly. He must have been afraid that we would catch up to him. So he turned back halfway and hid near Yellow Flower Ridge. Zhang Fan sneered, let's go. He must still be somewhere around here. Yes, disciple will leave now. The disciple cupped his hands and left. At this time, Xiao Hua had already put away the god statue and was about to fly up. Suddenly, he thought, Zhang Fan threw away the god statue in Shang Huaming's inheritance palace. Of course, he wasn't afraid of being seen by senior sister. Since this is the case, then senior sister must be unable to enter the inheritance palace. Then, wouldn't senior sister have lost her value? Senior sister's life is in danger? For a moment, Xiao Hua stood in the air, not knowing what to do. After a while, he let out a long sigh. What a pity, what a pity. I have the heart, but I'm powerless. Even if Senior Martial Sister follows me out of Yellow Flower Ridge, where else can we go? It would be better to let Senior Sister stay in 100 Herbs Gate. She might even be able to keep her life. Forget it. Let's go. Let's go. As he spoke, he urged his magic power and flew rapidly in the direction of Huanhua sect. His speed was several times faster than it was at noon. Just as Xiao Hua flew away for the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the disciples of 100 Herbs Gate arrived and searched desperately, but how could they find traces of Xiao Hua? Even after that, Zhang Fan sent a lot of people to search a larger area, but the direction they were looking for wasn't the direction of Huanhua sect. Not to mention how fast they were flying. Even if they followed Xiao Hua's previous worst-case scenario, even if their young sect master Zhang Fan and that foundation establishment stage elder went out to search together, he was afraid that they wouldn't be able to find anything. Although Xiao Hua urged his magic power with all his might and raised his flying speed to the fastest, he flew forward for nearly 4 hours. At this time, the sky was already slightly bright. Along the way, he flew over a continuous range of mountains. Occasionally, he would see a sparse village on the plains or beside a river. Xiao Hua only looked at them, not daring to stop. At this time, the flying talisman on his body was gradually losing its effect. Xiao Hua had no choice but to stop. After looking around, his figure landed and flashed to the side of a mountain stream. Panting slightly, Xiao Hua's nervous mood gradually calmed down. He calculated that he had just flown for 4 hours. Although he wasn't sure exactly how far he had flown, his speed should be several times faster than the second layer of the aura refining stage. Whether it was time or distance, he definitely far exceeded 100 Herbs Gate's estimation. Even the disciples who were chasing him earlier might not have chased him this far. Therefore, Xiao Hua sat cross-legged, very peacefully regulating his breathing and recovering his magic power. Time flowed like water. When Xiao Hua opened his eyes again, the sun was already high in the sky. The mountain stream was empty, and birds were singing. This kind of unknown sound was everywhere, giving off a feeling of paradise outside the world. Xiao Hua closed his eyes again, relaxing his mind. It was as if he had grown another pair of eyes, reflecting everything around him into his heart. The quiet and peaceful atmosphere also made his slightly tired heart feel extremely tranquil. Alas, after a long time, Xiao Hua let out a long sigh. What's the point of being a person? What's the point of only cultivating? Take school head Xiao, for example. He's lazy, doesn't like trouble, and doesn't want to offend anyone. Unexpectedly, he was also targeted by 100 Herbs Gate, and in a moment of carelessness, his sect was exterminated. What's more, Little White was already a demonic beast undergoing tribulation. With great difficulty, it cultivated from a snake to the foundation building stage. How difficult was that? Unfortunately, when it succeeded, it became a small fish that got caught in the crossfire. I didn't hear Senior Martial Sister mention Little White's corpse. Presumably, long before she returned to Yellow Flower Ridge, 100 Herbs Gate had already taken her back to Medicine Farmer Peak. Since cultivation is so cruel, it's really not as good as a mortal building a house by this stream. When he's thirsty, he'll drink morning dew. When he's hungry, he'll catch fish in the stream. He'll live a carefree life. Thinking up to this point, Xiao Hua let out a burst of hoarse laughter. He said self-deprecatingly, even if it's this carefree life, how long can it last? Not to mention that life is short, several decades will pass in the blink of an eye. Even if I hide from the world here, how can it be a true paradise? Even a great formation like Yellow Flower Ridge was breached, and this mountain wilderness is even more defenseless. If any cultivator finds you displeasing to the eye, a yellow talisman will be enough to take your life. How can you still talk about living a carefree life? Survival of the fittest, survival of the fittest. Only by cultivating extraordinary magical abilities can one have the freedom to not be controlled by others. Only then can one soar freely in this world. Thinking up to this point, Xiao Hua couldn't help but feel his blood boil. His entire mind opened up, and an incomparable ambition was born. It was as if he wanted to trample this world under his feet. It's good to think clearly, but I can't think too far. Biting off more than I can chew will only make me fall even more miserably. After a moment, Xiaohua gradually calmed down. The corners of his mouth revealed a slight smile. I'll slowly raise my cultivation. Only when I have the strength will I have the qualifications to think about more things. Immediately, Xiaohua waved his hand and took out the snake-shaped ring from the space. At this time, the ring was different from before. At the very beginning, the ring in Xiaohua's space only had a snake body. The snake body didn't have a snake head at the front, nor did it have a snake tail at the back. There were only a few vague claws. At this time, the snake body's back had already been mended. Only 2 claws could be seen growing out of the abdomen. Each of the claws had 5 toes, and they clawed down from the air. The mended snake tail was also different from an ordinary snake tail. The tail was extremely similar to a butterfly's wings. The shape of the entire ring was exactly the same as when Xiaohua saw Little White transform into a python dragon to undergo tribulation. Even if Xiaohua had never seen a dragon before, he already understood that this was a dragon-shaped ring. It was a ring that lacked a dragon head. Of course, this wasn't the most important thing. What made Xiaohua frown and think hard the most was that when he was unconscious on the peak of Cherishing Flower Peak a few days ago, this dragon-shaped ring passed some incomplete cultivation method into his mind. And this incomplete cultivation method was the so-called dragon transformation art. At the same time, he also knew that this dragon-shaped ring was called Dragon Jade. It's very strange. This dragon transformation art looks extremely simple, but it's completely different from the Death Flower Dark Mantra that I've comprehended before. It's as if it's simply not used for cultivation, or perhaps it's used to refine the body. Xiaohua's only knowledge of cultivation came from Zhang Qingxiao's nagging, but even if it's for refining the body, this cultivation method, I'm also unable to make sense of it. I don't know how to start. Could it be because the cultivation method is incomplete? Maybe when I find this Dragon Jade's dragon head and complete this dragon transformation art, I'll be able to cultivate it. But that's also not right. If this dragon transformation art was given to me by Little White, then why can it cultivate into a dragon? This Dragon Jade is only the tail, and it's even less than half of mine now. Xiaohua scratched his head a bit. He held the Dragon Jade with both hands, his fingers stroking the fine dragon scales on the Dragon Jade's body as he thought carefully. Suddenly, his 2 hands touched the Dragon Jade's meridians. They jumped slightly, as if it was a kind of pleasant surprise, a kind of pleasure. What's going on here? Xiaohua's heart stirred, and he tried again. Sure enough, the meridians moved slightly again, as if they were not happy at all. When Xiaohua tried to send his magic power into the Dragon Jade again, the meridians did not have any reaction. Suddenly, Xiaohua remembered the change in his meridians when Little White was going through the tribulation. That lightning tribulation was clearly Little White's, so why are my meridians so scared? That lightning tribulation was clearly aimed at Little White, so why did it hit me instead? Could it be that my meridians are somewhat special? That's right, sect leader. Didn't he say before? He felt that my meridians are different from normal meridians, as if they have vitality and vitality. It can even be said that they're alive. Living meridians, really inconceivable. Could it be that my cultivation can't be raised normally because of these meridians? Could it be that I have to cultivate my meridians first before my cultivation can be raised normally? Xiaohua followed his own thoughts and Xiao Yuehong's words and continued to think without restraint. Suddenly, an inconceivable idea, one that he had never thought of before, appeared in Xiaohua's mind. -5. Chapter 1286. My meridians. Since they might be alive and are so sensitive to Little White's lightning tribulation, and Little White might be cultivating the dragon transformation art, then, can I also? No, that's not right. Can my meridians also cultivate the dragon transformation art? An unimaginable idea formed in Xiaohua's mind. Once this idea was born, it was immediately like withered grass meeting the spring breeze, dry firewood meeting a raging fire. It became uncontrollable, becoming a spark of fire that started a prairie fire. Moreover, as this idea brewed in Xiaohua's mind, he increasingly felt that this idea could be implemented. Meridians are thin and long, like a long snake. Although I don't know how long it is, if I cultivate it bit by bit, I will eventually be able to cultivate it to the end. Xiaohua was all smiles, as if he had discovered a huge gold mine. The saliva at the corner of his mouth was about to drip down. But if this dragon transformation art is successfully cultivated, my meridians will become a dragon. What about me? Will I also become a dragon? Xiaohua suddenly thought, I understand. The god in Shang Huaming's inheritance palace cultivated the dragon transformation art? She didn't have legs, only a snake body. Could it be that when I cultivate to the end, I will become that kind of person? If that's the case, I won't do it. Not a human, not a snake. Really ugly. Xiaohua curled his lips and waved his hand. The statue of the god was taken out by him. It was unknown how heavy the statue was, but in Xiaohua's hand, it was not heavy at all. It seemed to be an empty shell. Fortunately, the tail of this god is indeed a snake tail and not a dragon tail. I remember that Little White also had a dragon tail, exactly the same as this Longyu. Presumably, this so-called god did not cultivate the dragon transformation art. Right? Could it be that this dragon transformation art was created by this god? Xiaohua thought again. Oh, that's not right. The middle part of this Longyu is in the space behind my head. It has nothing to do with this god. Could it be that it is related to the overseas celestial race? Thinking, Xiaohua put the statue of the god into the space, and then put the Longyu inside. Cultivate or not? Xiaohua was somewhat hesitant. If I cultivate a dragon, I'm afraid it will be a yellow dragon? With Little White. Sigh, Little White is already gone. Even if I master the yellow dragon, I won't be able to see Little White again. Sigh, what am I thinking? I don't even know how to use the meridians to cultivate the dragon transformation art. Why should I worry about it? I really don't know how to treat a disease if I'm not sick. Xiaohua suddenly realized and slapped his forehead. I should think more about the bone refinement technique that I obtained from reverse light and see how I can master the light evasion technique step by step. Why would I suddenly think of cultivating the dragon transformation art? Using meridians to train. Xiaohua almost laughed involuntarily. However, there are many difficulties in cultivating the light evasion technique. Last night in the cave, he also thought about it a bit. According to the reverse light evasion technique that was transmitted to his mind, before cultivating the real light evasion technique, there must be two conditions. The first is to temper the bones of the whole body 7 times, completely tempering them into 7 colors like light. The fluctuations of the bones of the whole body should also be the same as light. Only then can the body merge with the light and cultivate the light evasion technique. The second condition is to master the 5 elements evasion technique of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, as well as the wind and thunder evasion technique one by one. Only then can one be qualified to cultivate the light evasion technique. These two conditions are out of Xiaohua's reach. Let's talk about the 5 elements evasion technique first. Xiaohua has never heard of it. Zhang Qingxiao has never said a single word in her daily chatter. As for Xiao Yuehong, who is in the middle stage of foundation establishment, he has never used the evasion technique. How can Xiaohua know? Then there is the bone refinement technique. It is clearly stated in the martial technique that one must first have the bone tempering fist technique and magic art. Then, one must use the 5 elements origin to temper the bones. Not to mention what the 5 elements origin is, Xiaohua simply doesn't know. Even the bone tempering fist technique and magic art, although the golden figure in reverse light evasion technique used it many times, in Xiaohua's mind, he doesn't remember it at all. The remnant memories that occasionally remain in his mind are telling Xiaohua that the figure is completely different from a human's figure. Since the figure is different, the bone-tempering fist technique and magic art will naturally be different. In other words, what the golden figure taught is not suitable for Xiaohua. If Xiaohua wants to temper his bones, then he must find the bone-tempering fist technique and magic art that are suitable for him. Good. I originally thought that I picked up a treasure and fainted for more than a month because I had a fortuitous encounter and obtained some world-shaking martial technique. I didn't expect that it was actually just a reflection of the moon in the water, completely useless. In the end, I still have to painstakingly do it myself. Xiaohua doesn't know whether to laugh or cry. He thinks, if I want to practice the light evasion technique, one must find the 5 elements evasion technique, and the other one must find the bone-tempering fist technique or magic art. These are all inexplicable things, simply more unrealistic than comprehending how to cultivate the dragon transformation art. TCH, Xiaohua almost raises his middle finger. If I want to practice the light evasion technique, it would be better to be down-to-earth and cultivate ordinary martial techniques. From the second layer of the Qi refining stage, the third layer, to the foundation establishment stage and the gold core stage, this is more realistic. There is always a bit of hope. After thinking it through, Xiaohua threw all unrealistic thoughts to the back of his mind and inwardly calculated. 100 Zhang Peak is very far from here. It can be said that it is in the opposite direction. If there are any dangerous places in between, the sect master didn't say anything. If I want to go there, I must first inquire about it and make some preparations. In any case, it is still early. There is no need to rush to 100 Zhang Peak. Although Senior Marshal Sister gave me some yellow talismans, it is still not enough. I have to find someone to exchange for some. But who can I find? What can I use to exchange with them? Xiaohua has never been to E-City. He also doesn't know how to exchange. In his hands, he only has a single spirit stone on the body of the puppet in his mind. He really is poor to the point of jingling. That's right, I can use spiritual plants. Xiaohua suddenly slapped his head and suddenly came to a realization. No, in the space behind Xiaohua's mind, not only were there the absorption fruit and black tubergrass used to refine the Peiyuan pill, but also the parasol grass and blood-devouring grass used to refine the parasol pill were over 100 years old. Even the exquisite grass used to refine the foundation-building pill had sprouted tender shoots. Obviously, they were already over 100 years old. Moreover, Xiaohua faintly felt that ever since he advanced to the second layer of the Qi refining realm, the spiritual light emitted by the tracing light in his mind space had strengthened. It seemed to be a bit stronger than before, almost 2 years old in a day. However, whether it was true or not, Xiaohua himself wasn't clear. After all, he had never seen spiritual plants over 100 years old. Everything he saw was from Shang Huoming's ancient records. The detailed age of the spiritual plants still needed to be confirmed further. However, even so, these 100-years-old spiritual plants were really amazing. After all, according to Xiaohua's experience, the spiritual plants that Xiao Xinrui and the others produced in E-City were all 10 to 20 years old. There was also the parasol pill refined from these aged spiritual plants. These kinds of things could occupy a place in E-City. Of course, the 100-years-old spiritual plants would be even more popular. But where is this E-City? I only heard second senior brother and the others say that it's in Jinghua City, but they didn't say the specific location. Moreover, there should still be some time before we leave E-City. Even if I go, what can I do? Just as he was thinking, he heard the sound of weapons in the air above the mountain stream. Hearing the sound, Xiaohua was startled. He hurriedly hid behind a thick tree several zhang away. He stuck out half of his head and secretly peeked in the air. It can't be the 100 Herbs sect chasing after us, right? He saw that in the air several zhang north of the mountain stream. 3 young Taoists around 20 years old were making hand seals and using their transcendence energy to drive 3 sword talismans. They were fighting back and forth. One of them was around 20 years old, around the 5th layer of the Qi refining realm. He wore a Taoist robe. His teeth were white and his lips were red. His face was arrogant. His opponents were 2 men around 25 to 26 years old. One of them wore a Taoist robe, while the other wore slightly sloppy clothes. These 2 people were both at the 4th layer of the Qi refining realm. At this time, their faces were already red and beads of sweat were dripping down from their foreheads. Although Xiaohua's cultivation level was low, he could tell at a glance that these 2 people were already at a disadvantage. Not only did the young Taoist's sword talismans move unhindered and unhindered, his sword moves were tight and his transcendence energy was even more profound. The other 2 people couldn't compare to him. The 2 people's sword talismans had already dimmed. The flying swords transformed from the sword talismans were swaying. Every time they collided with the young Taoist's flying swords, they seemed to be unable to withstand it. One of them clenched his teeth and made a hand seal. The sword talisman suddenly emitted a sword light. Ignoring the brilliance of the young Taoist's sword talisman, it looked for an opening and stabbed towards the young Taoist's armpit. Then, the other person made a hand seal and his body swayed at the same time. He actually ignored the sword talisman and prepared to use a flight talisman to escape. Haha, you think you can escape? Han Fei, why haven't you handed over the thing yet? The young Taoist laughed wildly. He simply ignored the sword talisman stabbing towards him. He slightly channeled his transcendence energy. The flying sword transformed from the sword talisman, suddenly split into two and stabbed towards the two people. Dual splendor sword? Seeing this, Han Fei was greatly alarmed. Zhang Huanqi, you're a senior in the 6th layer of qi refining. Why are you still making things difficult for us 4th layer qi refining juniors? Only those in the 6th layer of qi refining can use dual splendor sword? Just as Han Fei cried out in alarm, his flying sword had already pierced Zhang Huanqi's body. A clear light appeared on Zhang Huanqi's body, blocking the flying sword. The sword couldn't pierce through it all. Meanwhile, the two sword lights he controlled pierced towards Han Fei and the young Taoist. What do you two loose cultivators know? I am in the 5th layer of qi refining. I can also use dual splendor sword. How can you know the secret techniques of my splendid sect? Didn't you want to stop by the day before yesterday? Now that I personally delivered myself to your doorstep, why don't you dare to accept my challenge? Senior, you've wronged me. Han Fei's expression was very anxious. He looked at the similarly panicked loose cultivators next to him and said, the day before yesterday, fellow Taoist Qiao Fengyue and I didn't go for you. We were preparing to ambush someone else. Senior, you walked into the ambush by mistake. Didn't we apologize at that time? Senior, why do you have to force us? Apologize? Zhang Huanqi laughed coldly. Several fireball talismans and 2 earth and spike talismans. If I wasn't careful and didn't have the sect's secret treasures on me, wouldn't I have already lost my life? -5. Chapter 1287. Cut the crap. If the words of a rogue cultivator can be taken seriously, then I'm afraid the sun in the sky will rise from the west. Hand over your life. Zhang Huanqi sneered, his sword talisman stabbing towards Han Fei. Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue smiled wryly. Xiaohua couldn't tell whether they were really trying to ambush the other person, or whether they coveted Zhang Huanqi because he was alone. Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue channeled their transcendence energy and fought a few more rounds. They were obviously no match for Zhang Huanqi. Seeing that the two of them were about to lose their lives, Xiaohua held his breath and carefully hid himself to avoid being seen by them. At this moment, a sudden shout came from the air behind Xiaohua. Fellow Taoist, please have mercy. Xiaohua was slightly stunned and hurriedly turned his head. He saw several 4th or 5th level qi refining cultivators in the air several hundred feet above the mountain stream. They were all wearing different Taoist robes as they flew over his head, flying towards the place where the 3 of them were fighting. Shit, I'll be seen by others. Xiaohua hurriedly dodged. Of course, he avoided Zhang Huanqi and the others, but his figure was exposed behind a tree. Just as Xiaohua raised his head to look, one of the cultivators had already discovered Xiaohua's trace with extreme sensitivity. Xiaohua was greatly regretful. He didn't know what relationship these people had with Zhang Huanqi. He had just come out of Yellow Flower Ridge and might have gotten himself into trouble. He couldn't help but wonder if he should run away now. Fellow Taoist, please have mercy. At the front of the group was a 5th level qi refining cultivator. He wore a loose gray Taoist robe and his face was like a full moon. His face was red and shiny, and he had black hair and thick eyebrows. He was about 30 years old. His voice was extremely loud and clear. Just as he spoke, he waved his hand and 2 light blue radiances flew out, covering Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue. Condensing water talisman? When the light blue radiances hit the 2 of them, they immediately rippled into a watery mist. The mist immediately solidified, and a thin layer of watery blue radiance formed on the 2 of them. At the same time, Zhang Huanqi's flying sword talisman transformed into a flying sword and stabbed Xiao Fengyue. When the flying sword saw the watery blue radiance, the radiance rippled but wasn't damaged. Zhang Huanqi involuntarily cried out, "Who are you? Why are you interfering with my Shanghua sect's business?" Shanghua sect? That person also flew over at this time. When he heard the name of the Shanghua sect, he couldn't help but frown slightly. After hesitating for a while, he turned his head and asked, "Fellow Taoist, which sect are you two from?" "You." Zhang Huanqi was stunned. He thought that this person was Xiao Fengyue's helper, but he didn't know him at all. Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue looked at each other. They cupped their hands and replied, "Fellow Taoist, please know that we are both itinerant cultivators." "Oh," the man nodded and said, "If you two fellow Taoists believe why don't you tell me about the matter with this fellow Taoist? Perhaps I can be the peacemaker?" Zhang Huanqi's expression darkened. Although this person didn't say anything, it was obvious that he wanted to interfere. If it weren't for the fact that this person was in the 5th layer of aura refining and had several 4th layer aura refining cultivators behind him, Zhang Huanqi probably wouldn't have been a match for him. Otherwise, he would have attacked him long ago. Suppressing his anger, Zhang Huanqi cupped his hands and said, "I am Zhang Huanqi from the Magnificent Flower Sect. Do you have any relationship with my Shanghua sect?" "Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. I have long heard of fellow Taoist Zhang's name. You're a good man who clearly distinguishes between kindness and hatred. It's my great fortune to meet you now." The cultivator cupped his hands and said with a smile, "I am Qing Fengmin, an itinerant cultivator who has been abandoned by the heavens. Since I've encountered a matter involving low-level itinerant cultivators, it's not good for me to not ask." Abandoned by the heavens? Itinerant cultivators? Zhang Huanqi frowned. It seemed that he wasn't familiar with this name, but when he heard Qing Fengmin's last sentence, he couldn't help but exclaim, "Abandoned by the heavens?" The so-called alliance of low-level itinerant cultivators that was formed 3 years ago? Fellow Taoist Jiang has a good memory. That's right. Qing Fengmin said with a smile, "It's not easy for itinerant cultivators like us to survive in the country of Xi, especially those below the 4th layer of the Qi refining realm. We're often in a precarious situation. In order to survive, I had no choice but to ally with some other itinerant cultivators and form this alliance. Fellow Taoist, please don't laugh at us." Humph. Although abandoned by the heavens has only been established for 3 years, it's developing very quickly. I heard that even some foundation establishment itinerant cultivators are showing signs of joining. Even the small sects in the country of Xi can't compare with this kind of reputation. How would I dare to laugh at it? Zhang Huanqi wasn't afraid of abandoned by the heavens and sneered, "A just cause enjoys abundant support. An unjust cause finds little support. This is an unbreakable truth. Although abandoned by the heavens, only protect low-level itinerant cultivators below the 4th layer of the Qi refining realm, who hasn't started from a low-level itinerant cultivator. Those foundation establishment seniors naturally know the dangers of low-level itinerant cultivators, which is why they lend a helping hand. There's nothing strange about it." Qing Fengmin still had a smile on his face, and his etiquette didn't diminish. "Then fellow Taoist Qing, are you sure you want to interfere in this matter?" Zhang Huanqi's face turned cold. "Hee, fellow Taoist Jiang, don't be anxious. Although abandoned by the heavens, protect low-level itinerant cultivators, I don't mean to blindly protect them. If these two fellow Taoists are indeed in the wrong, and fellow Taoist Jiang really has a grudge against them, I will immediately turn around and leave. I won't ask half a word." Qing Fengmin said with a smile and cupped his hands. "Humph." Zhang Huanqi snorted and didn't say anything else. Qing Fengmin then turned to Han Fei and said, "How should I address you two fellow Taoists? Did you have some misunderstanding with fellow Taoist Jiang?" Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue were overjoyed when they heard this. It was as if a long drought had finally met with rain. They hurriedly narrated the whole story. The story was simple, just like what Xiao Hua heard. The day before yesterday, Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue had set up an ambush. They wanted to scheme against another person, but Zhang Huanqi had barged in. Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue were ruthless, wanting to kill him in one fell swoop. But after the two sides fought, the two realized that they were wrong. But how could there be right and wrong in the cultivation world? What's more, you were ruthless. Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue wanted to make the best of it, but Zhang Huanqi was in the fifth layer of the Qi refining realm and a disciple of the Shanghua sect. Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue were far from being able to deal with him. After weighing the pros and cons, the two of them decided to stop. As they ran away, they sent out sound-transmitting talismans to express their apologies. Zhang Huanqi was on a mission from his sect, so he couldn't chase after them. He could only let them escape. When Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue saw that Zhang Huanqi didn't chase after them, they thought that he had forgiven them. In the past few days, they relaxed their vigilance and didn't deliberately hide their whereabouts. Who would have thought that Zhang Huanqi would complete his mission today and come back to settle old scores with them? Well, hearing Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue's words, Qing Fengmin also frowned. Although this matter wasn't a matter of life and death, but it wasn't far from it. You ambushed him. If his cultivation wasn't high, wouldn't he have been dead by now? Seeing Qing Fengmin hesitate, Zhang Huanqi sneered. Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue, on the other hand, were anxious. They cupped their hands and said, "Senior Qing, it's really a misunderstanding between us. Think about it. Senior Zhang is in the fifth layer of the Qi refining realm and a disciple of the Shanghua sect. Even if we had 10 times the courage, we wouldn't dare to ambush him." Alas, Qing Fengmin sighed. You two have made things difficult for this matter. Even if I'm heaven-forsaken, I'm afraid I can't interfere. Hearing this, Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue became anxious. They shouted, "Senior Qing, please save us. If we can escape from this disaster, we are willing to join Heaven-Forsaken and follow your orders." Qing Fengmin shook his head slightly. My two fellow Taoists are too different. In Heaven-Forsaken, everyone is equal. We all have the idea of not giving up on ourselves and helping each other. Even I can't order others to do what I want. Senior. Xiao Fengyue's tone was almost pleading. Senior Qing, a fourth-layer Qi refining cultivator, flew over from behind Qing Fengmin and said with a smile, "Senior Zhang of the Shanghua sect and fellow Taoist Han aren't mortal enemies. This is all a misunderstanding. Senior Zhang wants to kill fellow Taoist Han and Xiao Fengyue out of anger. Even if he kills them, Senior Zhang won't get any benefits. In my opinion, why don't fellow Taoist Han and Xiao Fengyue take out enough spirit stones or medicinal pills to compensate for Senior Zhang's loss in exchange for their lives? Wouldn't that be the best of both worlds?" "Excellent." Qing Fengmin clapped his hands and laughed. "You're right." He turned to Zhang Huanqi and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, even if you kill them, it's just to vent your anger. There's no need to do so. If you can compensate them with external items and avoid karma, wouldn't that be great?" Zhang Huanqi's heart trembled. He'd heard of the Heaven-Forsaken Alliance before. At the time, he'd snorted disdainfully. They were all fourth-layer Qi refining cultivators, so what could they do? But now, facing so many fourth-layer Qi refining cultivators and a fifth-layer Qi refining cultivator, he wouldn't be able to easily take Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue's lives. If they fought, he might not be able to escape easily. As a disciple of the Shanghua sect, he might not necessarily be afraid of Heaven-Forsaken. But what if? There's no what if. Zhang Huanqi sneered inwardly. He didn't have any deep hatred for Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue to begin with. Whether he killed them or not was up to him. If he was satisfied with something, he could spare them. Seeing Zhang Huanqi's silence, a smile appeared on Qing Fengmin's face. "Fellow Taoist Zhang, you're indeed a disciple of a large sect. You're broad-minded and forgiving people whenever possible. That's the wisdom of the Shanghua sect's disciples. Come, fellow Taoist Han and fellow Taoist Xiao, hurry up and thank fellow Taoist Zhang for his magnanimity." Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue were overjoyed and hurriedly bowed. "Thank you for sparing our lives, Senior Zhang." "Humph." Zhang Huanqi flicked his sleeve. "It's too early to say. Let me see. What you have that's worth your lives. In my storage pouch, there are 100 low-grade spirit stones, 4 mid-grade spirit stones, a dozen or so spirit herbs that are 10 years old, and a dozen or so magia pills. Please kindly accept them, Senior Zhang." Han Fei said hurriedly. Xiao Fengyue also hurriedly said, "The spirit stones, Spirit herbs and pills in my storage pouch are about the same as fellow Taoist Han's. Humph. Zhang Huanqi's face was full of contempt. Indeed, apart from spirit stones, Xiaohua hadn't seen many of these things before. To Shang Huaming, the rest were not worth mentioning. -5. Chapter 1288. As for spirit stones, although Xiaohua hadn't seen many, Shang Huaming must have a lot. After all, a parasol elixir could be exchanged for some low-grade spirit stones. If Xiao Yueheng wasn't lazy, Shang Huaming would have saved a lot of spirit stones. Seeing Zhang Huanqi's sneer, Qing Fengmin also smiled bitterly. After all, he was a rogue cultivator with a shallow foundation. He couldn't compare with a disciple of a sect. Xiao Fengyue obviously knew that their things were limited and not enough to exchange for their lives. He glanced at Han Fei, and the two exchanged glances, then hurriedly said, "Please let us finish. Senior Jiang, we know that our belongings are shabby and these things are not worthy of your attention, but we also know that there is a dangerous place in the Amang Mountains where hundreds of years old Ling Long grass grows. Because of our limited cultivation, we didn't dare to go deep and only picked some Ling Long grass in the periphery. Please take a look at these Ling Long grass first. If you think this information is credible, we are willing to exchange the information of the Ling Long grass for our lives." Hearing this, Zhang Huanqi's eyes lit up. The Foundation Establishment Elixir was the key to advancing from the Qi refining stage to the Foundation Establishment stage. Even the Shanghua sect, which was one of the top cultivation sects in the country of Xi, was in short supply. Zhang Huanqi's aptitude was average among his fellow disciples. When he was just 20 years old, his cultivation had reached the peak of the 5th level of Qi refining. Compared to some of the geniuses in the sect, he was much weaker. If he developed normally, he might not be able to reach the Foundation Establishment stage and might not even be able to get a Foundation Establishment elixir from the sect. His Foundation Establishment cultivation was simply like a flower in a mirror. If he could get some mature Ling Long grass and offer it to the Shanghua sect, the Foundation Establishment elixir would be easy to get and his Foundation Establishment cultivation would be within reach. Well, even if it was just information, if the seniors in the sect picked the Ling Long grass, they would be rewarded according to their merits. Thinking of this, Zhang Huanqi frowned and shook his head slightly. Fellow Taoist Qiao's words are too easy. If there really is a Ling Long grass, it is equivalent to your lives. Just the information of the Ling Long grass alone, I don't know if it is true or not. Hee. You want to uncover the grudge between I and you? It is really too easy. Senior Jiang, this junior's information is absolutely true. The two of us have never told anyone about this. If you don't believe me, how about this junior bring you there? Han Fei hurriedly said in a panic. Take me there? Zhang Huanqi was slightly tempted, but when he looked at Qing Fengmin and the others, he immediately rejected the idea and shook his head slightly. Senior, the two of us are sincerely apologizing to you. Qiao Fengyue smiled bitterly. How can you believe us? Next to him, Qing Fengmin said with a smile, Fellow Taoist Jiang, why don't we first take a look at their spiritual grasses and see if they match what they said? If fellow Taoist has any ideas, why don't you tell me? Hearing this, Zhang Huanqi smiled and took the spirit grass from Han Fei's hand. After carefully identifying them, he nodded and said, These spirit grass are very rare. Judging from their color, they should be grown in the wild. It is consistent with what the two of them said. Excellent. Qing Fengmin clapped his hands and said, in other words, fellow Taoist Han and fellow Taoist Qiao didn't deceive fellow Taoist Jiang. I only said that the spirit grass is real. As for the exquisite grass, how would I know if it is real or not? Zhang Huanqi retorted. Well, fellow Taoist Jiang is right. Qing Fengmin didn't seem to be angry at being refuted. He only said gently, but the information of the exquisite grass in exchange for the lives of two people, even I feel that it is too easy. Then, he hesitated for a while. Looking at Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue, he gritted his teeth and said, Since it is the lives of two rogue cultivators who are willing to join Heaven Forsaken, I may have to offer something. As he spoke, he patted a small storage pouch in front of him. A dark green object appeared in his hand. Qing Fengmin smiled bitterly and said, To be honest, fellow Taoist Jiang, most of us rogue cultivators don't have anything valuable. The storage pouch I have is not much better than fellow Taoist Zhang's. If I offer a spirit grass or medicinal pill like the exquisite grass, I definitely don't have it. Looking at the object in his hand, he raised his hand and put it in front of Jiang Huanqi, saying, I obtained this when I was training in the Imitang Mountains a month ago. I don't know what it is, but I am sure that there is some great opportunity in it. I originally wanted to keep it to study or use it when the opportunity came. But since fellow Taoist Jiang is involved today, I can't care about anything else. Fellow Taoist Jiang, please take a look and see if it is worth it for fellow Taoist Jiang to stop. Jiang Huanqi didn't care and casually took it, but when he looked at it carefully, he couldn't help but stiffen. A trace of ecstasy appeared in his eyes. Just as the corners of his mouth curled into a smile, it was immediately replaced by doubt. Jiang Huanqi's eyes turned slightly. He raised his head and asked in confusion, Fellow Taoist Qing, what is this? What is it used for? Qing Fomin smiled bitterly and said, I obtained this by chance when I was traveling in the Imitang Mountains. I don't know what it is. I have been studying it for more than a month, but I still don't know its use. Alas, forget it. If fellow Taoist Jiang thinks that this thing has no origin, then just pretend that I didn't say anything. As he spoke, Qing Fomin reached out to take it. I see. Jiang Huanqi withdrew his hand and nodded slightly, saying, since fellow Taoist Qing is so protective of rogue cultivators. After all, I used to be a low-level qi refining cultivator. I also know the hardships of rogue cultivators. This thing, although it has no origin, it is still fellow Taoist Qing's sincere heart. I will consider it as making friends with fellow Taoist Qing. When everyone heard this, they were overjoyed. Qing Fomin smiled and said, thank you for your help, fellow Taoist Jiang. Then he turned to Han Fei and Xiao Fomin and said, fellow Taoists, please tell fellow Taoist Jiang about that place. In addition, please swear that you will never mention this place to anyone else in the future. Of course. Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue cupped their hands and smiled. Then, Jiang Huanqi clapped his hand and took out a silence talisman. He set up a restriction around the three of them. Qing Fomin and the others couldn't hear their conversation inside the restriction. Looking at Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue's words and Jiang Huanqi's slight nod, the three of them seemed to be satisfied. Not long after, Jiang Huanqi waved his hand and put away the silence talisman. He cupped his hands and smiled at Qing Fomin, saying, fellow Taoist Qing is really talented. If this heaven-forsaken is in your hands, it will definitely prosper in the cultivation world of the country of Xi. I don't dare. I am only one of the three initiators. Moreover, there is no hierarchy among the fellow Taoists in heaven-forsaken. There is no control or prosperity. Qing Fomin corrected him with a smile. Hee. Jiang Huanqi smiled and didn't say much. He cupped his hands and said goodbye to Qing Fomin. He didn't even look at the others. After Jiang Huanqi left in a hurry, Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue stepped forward and bowed with gratitude, saying, Junior greets Senior Qing. Senior, thank you for saving our lives. Hee, no need. We are all rogue cultivators. Of course, we have to support each other so that we won't be bullied by others. Besides, as long as you join Heaven Forsaken, you will be fellow Taoists in the future. You don't have to be polite. Qing Fomin hurriedly helped the two of them up and said with a smile, well, of course we have to follow the rules. But how do we join Heaven Forsaken? Han Fei asked respectfully. Hee, that's easy. But before I explain it to you, I have to invite a fellow Taoist to come up. Qing Fengmin's face was genial. He turned to Xiao Hua and said warmly, fellow Taoist, could it be that you want to hide behind the tree? Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue were stunned. The others also looked at Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua looked at them for a long time and knew that they were all rogue cultivators. Moreover, there was even a rogue cultivator who was heaven forsaken. He had already dispelled the idea of escaping. When he heard Qing Fengmin's question, he knew that he couldn't hide. He put on a smile and walked out from behind the tree. He flew into the air and cupped his hands, saying, Junior Xiao Hua greets seniors. Han Fei and the others were shocked. They didn't expect someone else to be hiding under the tree. However, when they saw Xiao Hua's cultivation, they were even more shocked. Then, a wave of sympathy spontaneously rose in their hearts. That's right. Although these rogue cultivators didn't think highly of disciples from real sects, they were all cultivators from the first and second layer of aura refining, and had cultivated since they were young. Which one of them hadn't broken through to the second layer of aura refining when they were about 10 years old? It was only because of various reasons that they couldn't reach the third layer of aura refining for a long time that their cultivation was crippled, and they were expelled from the sect. Afterwards, due to other reasons, they slowly cultivated back to their peak. But even so, they had long reached the third or fourth layer of aura refining before the age of 18. As for those who cultivated on their own from the beginning, they had never seen anyone reach the early second layer of aura refining at the age of 18. Fellow Taoist Xiao, you must have heard me. I am Qing Fengmin. Is fellow Taoist Xiao cultivating on your own? Or are you an abandoned disciple of some sect? After Qing Fengmin returned the greeting, he was certain that Xiao Hua was a rogue cultivator. Xiao Hua was at a loss for words. He, I have spoken too much. Qing Fengmin immediately came to his senses. He slapped his forehead and said with a smile, how could I ask about this secret of my own origin? It's only because I saw that fellow Taoist cultivation is low that I felt a sense of concern. Please forgive me, fellow Taoist Xiao. I don't dare. Xiao Hua liked Qing Fengmin's amiable attitude very much. He quickly said, Junior also has some difficulties, otherwise I would have definitely told you. No matter, there's no need. Qing Fengmin waved his hand. I, heaven forsaken, have always believed that heroes don't ask about their origins. Miracles are man-made. Since fellow Taoist Xiao is a rogue cultivator, if you don't mind, I also invite fellow Taoist Xiao to join heaven forsaken. We can help each other. Xiao Hua was greatly surprised and said with a smile, Junior is also moved, but I don't know how to join heaven forsaken. How can we help each other and support each other? Qing Fengmin said with a smile, you and I are both rogue cultivators. When we cultivate, what do we lack the most? -5. Chapter 1289. Of course it's cultivation methods and medicinal pills. Xiao Hua spat out almost without thinking. Fellow Taoist Xiao is right. Qing Fengmin clapped his hands and laughed. As a disciple of a sect, there's no need to talk about cultivation methods. When you cultivate to a certain level, you'll be given a cultivation method. As long as you have the ability to cultivate, the sect won't be stingy with this cultivation method. Even the elders of the sect can't wait for you to cultivate to a higher level. It's the same for medicinal pills. Ordinary disciples will be given corresponding medicinal pills every month. If you can make more contributions to the sect, you'll get more medicinal pills. Huh? What? Xiao Hua was slightly stunned and muttered in his heart. Shang Huaming doesn't seem to have this kind of treatment. On the other hand, we rogue cultivators are born with a flaw. Medicinal pills are a bit easier to exchange with spiritual herbs or spirit stones. What we lack the most is cultivation methods. I don't know how many rogue cultivators have been stuck at the low level of qi refinement for their entire lives because they don't have the corresponding cultivation methods. Qing Fengmin bitterly lamented. Including Xiao Hua, several people also felt the same way. Xiao Hua himself could also be considered a loose cultivator. Moreover, he was only at the second layer of the qi refining stage. If he wanted to go further, he didn't even have a single mnemonic. Then senior's meaning is... Xiao Hua felt a bit strange and asked, but he secretly muttered in his heart, could it be that there's a complete cultivation method in this heaven forsaken? Qing Fengmin seemed to see through Xiao Hua's thoughts and shook his head. Heaven Forsaken is just a rogue cultivator's self-help alliance. It's not a cultivation sect. How could there be any cultivation methods? Then, looking at the astonishment on Xiao Hua's face, Qing Fengmin said with a smile, this question, I don't know how many people have asked in the past 3 years, so even if fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't say anything, I also know. Xiao Hua's face was embarrassed and he smiled apologetically. Then, this cultivation method matter? To enter my Heaven Forsaken and exchange what you need with the low-level cultivators in Heaven Forsaken and help each other, the first and only condition is to contribute your cultivation method so that the cultivators in Heaven Forsaken can comprehend it. Ah, Xiao Hua stared blankly. He had never thought of this condition before. Xiao Hua turned his head to look at Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue. The two of them were also surprised and somewhat puzzled. Their expressions were not out of Qing Fengmin's expectations. He chuckled and said, "This condition seems very harsh and difficult to understand. But my three fellow Taoists, think about it. If you join my Heaven Forsaken sect and contribute your cultivation methods to others to comprehend, you will be able to do so. While you contribute, you can also comprehend the cultivation methods of the other rogue cultivators of Tianqi. The number of cultivation methods is extremely huge." Xiaohua suddenly came to a realization. That's right, as long as I tell him the cultivation technique of the second layer of the aura refining realm, not to mention other people, even Qing Fengmin's cultivation technique would be at least the fifth layer of the aura refining realm, and Xiaohua would be able to immediately comprehend it. Thinking about it again, how many individual cultivators were there in Heavens Forsaken? There were probably hundreds of them. Wouldn't he have hundreds of mental cultivation methods to comprehend? Beside him, Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue also came to a realization, and their faces flashed with pleasant surprise. Not only that, I presume, that my three fellow Taoists also know the connection between body attributes and cultivation methods. Many individual cultivators are unable to cultivate because their body attributes don't match the cultivation methods they cultivate. This kind of trouble definitely doesn't exist in my Heavens Forsaken sect. Fellow Taoists, think about it. No matter what attribute you have in my Heavens Forsaken, there will definitely be cultivation methods that match your body attributes for you to comprehend. Qing Fengmin added more firewood to the fire. Junior agrees, Han Fei rushed to say. Junior has been stuck at the fourth layer of the aura refining realm all this time because my cultivation methods don't match. I've cultivated for several years without any progress. Since there's an alliance of rogue cultivators like Heavens Forsaken, how can Junior not join? It's just that our cultivation methods are only at the fourth layer of the aura refining realm. I wonder? Xiao Fengyue probed. That's right, Junior's cultivation method is even more shallow, only at the second layer of the aura refining realm. Xiaohua took the opportunity to say, Hee, although there are very few cultivation methods at the second layer of the aura refining realm, who told my Heavens Forsaken to have such a purpose? Qing Fengmin smiled and said, I work for everyone, and everyone works for me. Even if fellow Taoist Zhao's cultivation method is at the second layer of the aura refining realm, as long as you contribute it, you'll be considered joining my Heavens Forsaken. All cultivation methods, including cultivation methods that directly cultivate to the Foundation Establishment realm, can also be comprehended. There are cultivation methods that cultivate to the Foundation Establishment realm? Xiao Fengyue was overjoyed and asked urgently. Of course. Qing Fengmin said proudly, there are also many capable individuals among my group of rogue cultivators. Not to mention Foundation Establishment, even Golden Core cultivation methods may not necessarily not exist. Junior also wants to join. How could Xiao Fengyue still hesitate? He cupped his hands and said, Fellow Taoists, please wait a moment. I still have a condition that I haven't mentioned yet. Qing Fengmin waved his hand. Senior, didn't you say there was only one condition? Xiao Fengyue was curious. Oh, this can't be considered a second condition. Qing Fengmin smiled and said, in order to prevent people from harboring evil intentions and only coveting other people's cultivation methods and not completely taking out their own cultivation methods, I, Heavens Forsaken, have a supplementary condition. That is, if those who join Heavens Forsaken don't completely contribute their own cultivation methods, if this is discovered by others, their entire cultivation will be immediately crippled and they will be expelled from Heavens Forsaken. Oh, so it's like that. Han Fei and Xiao Fengyue sighed in relief and said with a smile, this is natural. How can there be only taking and not taking out? Hearing the two's reply, Qing Fengmin said with a smile on his face, there are many benefits to joining my Heavens Forsaken, so I won't say too much. You'll naturally know in the future. Oh, right, fellow Taoist Xiao. It seems you still haven't expressed your opinion? Seeing Qing Fengmin's eager gaze, Xiaohua was very conflicted. Logically speaking, Heaven's Forsaken's requirements were not high. As long as he took out what he knew of Shang Huaming's cultivation method, he would be able to comprehend other people's cultivation methods to the high levels of qi refinement and even foundation establishment and golden core cultivation methods. This was really a great temptation. However, Shang Huaming's cultivation method was passed down by Xiao Yuehong. Thinking of the names of Xiao Yuehong, Gong Mingwei, and Zhang Qingxiao, Xiao Hua couldn't help but have the thought of treasuring Shang Huaming's cultivation method. He really couldn't bear to take it out and let others comprehend it. In fact, thinking about it from another perspective, Shang Huaming's cultivation method had already been used by Xiao Xinrui as a life-saving bargaining chip. Although he didn't take it out now, wouldn't there be many people in 100 Herbs Gate who could comprehend Shang Huaming's cultivation method? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua felt that he was deceiving himself. But if it was really in his hands, he really couldn't take out this cultivation method. Forget it, let's think about it again. If I take out this cultivation method, will 100 Herbs Gate be willing to give up? Isn't that the same as revealing my whereabouts? Provoking 100 Herbs Gate's pursuit? Xiao Hua found a reason to convince himself. Alas, senior, this junior's cultivation method is really too shallow. How about this junior? Think about it again. Xiao Hua said with cupped hands. Fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't need to worry about this. Qing Fengmin looked at Xiao Hua thoughtfully and said, my fellow Taoists in Heaven Forsaken are all magnanimous people. They definitely won't care about this. However, since fellow Taoist Xiao still needs to think about it, I won't force you. Our country of Shi's rogue cultivators are one family. Heaven Forsaken is the best home for rogue cultivators. If one day fellow Taoist Xiao understands, you can join Heaven Forsaken at any time. Thank you for your righteousness, Senior Qing. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, then, this junior won't disturb senior anymore. Fellow Taoist Xiao wants to travel alone? Qing Fengmin didn't expect Xiao Hua to be in such a hurry to leave. He was slightly stunned and said, we're going to Jinghua City. I wonder if it's on the same way as fellow Taoist Xiao? If possible, it's best if fellow Taoist Xiao comes with us. Fellow Taoist Zhao's cultivation still makes I worried. Xiao Hua heard this and couldn't help but be overjoyed. He cupped his hands and said, that's just right. This junior also wants to see Jinghua City. If Senior Qing is interested, then this junior will disturb you. Don't mention it. We're all rogue cultivators. You don't need to be polite, Qing Fengmin said with a smile. Soon after, he slapped his forehead and said, look at me, I only thought about talking. I even forgot to introduce myself. Come. Let's introduce ourselves. From now on, we'll all be fellow Taoists in Heaven Forsaken. Xiao Hua and the other two didn't need to say anything. They had already reported their names just now. The first to speak was the fourth layer Qi refining cultivator who gave Qing Fengmin the idea just now. He wore an ochre-yellow Taoist robe, and his face was white and chubby. He looked quite young. I, Ma Qingcheng, greets the three fellow Taoists. Fellow Taoist Ma, you're experienced and knowledgeable. You've also seen many cultivation methods. There's no harm in you picking one or two that are suitable for fellow Taoist Xiao and revealing a little to him first. I see that fellow Taoist Xiao isn't a fool. It's definitely because his cultivation method and constitution are incompatible that he's been unable to advance for so long. If he can obtain a suitable cultivation method, he'll definitely become an expert in Heaven Forsaken. Qing Fengmin said with a smile as he pointed with his finger. I know, Ma Qingcheng replied with a smile. He flew in front of Xiao Hua and cupped his hands in greeting. Xiao Hua was grateful and also returned the greeting. Fellow Taoist Xiao, I am a few years older and my cultivation is also a bit higher. My experience and cultivation can also be considered to be some insights. If fellow Taoist doesn't mind, you can ask me any questions. Ma Qingqing lifted Xiao Hua up and said with a smile. In fact, many fellow Taoists were the same as fellow Taoist Xiao at the beginning. They all had some misgivings, but it turned out that their way of thinking was wrong. Fellow Taoist Xiao only needs to follow Heaven Forsaken's fellow Taoists for a period of time, and you'll know whether what I said is correct or not. Xiao Hua hurriedly smiled apologetically and said, Junior is afraid. Junior indeed has some misgivings in his heart, but If there's something Junior doesn't know, I hope Senior can dispel my doubts. Junior thanks you in advance. Hee, no harm. Ma Qingcheng waved his hand. The world's loose cultivators are one family. This person is actually warm-hearted. Qing Fengmin only said he was a loose cultivator from Xi, but he suddenly spread it to the world. As expected, he's amazing. Xiao Hua muttered inwardly. He couldn't forget Pylon and the twin bears, Chang Huan, and the others. It didn't matter who he was with. These people, he'd better kick them out of this house first. -5, you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.